It'll be Jason Gingell out of the hold of Mesco. Good snap, good hold, and the kick is blocked. Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. One of the greatest upsets in sports history.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
Well, good morning, and a great Wednesday morning to each and every one of you. Welcome to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I'm Thom Brennaman. We come your way Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern. You can find us on YouTube/Chatterbox Sports. We always ask that you please subscribe to the program. Today, we are live on Twitter. You can find us from now on at Facebook. Just search Chatterbox Sports. Thanks to all of you, our show growing by the thousands daily. If you'd prefer to join us in podcast form, wherever you go, Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever, just search Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman, and you're dialed in. Bengals back at it today, downtown, laser focused, no doubt. On the Cleveland Browns, kickoff is this Sunday at Paycor, set for 1 o'clock. As you know, the Bengals have lost 5 in a row to their division rivals. In fact, the last time they beat the Browns was in December of 2019. That was a matchup of Andy Dalton v. Baker Mayfield. My, how times have changed. C.J. Uzomah caught a touchdown pass in that game. Joe Mixon ran for 165 yards. The Bengals are an early 6-point favorite. Speaking of Baker Mayfield, what a day yesterday. He was signed by the LA Rams after being let go in Carolina. The Rams have lost 6 in a row. Matthew Stafford is out. The backup got hurt last week. Mayfield, in fact, was sent the Rams playbook before he even got on the plane yesterday because he might start tomorrow night against the LA Raiders. Jimmy Garoppolo might not be out for the year after all. His broken foot will not require surgery. He could return in 7 to 8 weeks. The Cowboys, meanwhile, brought in Odell Beckham Jr. for a visit and apparently are very concerned that that knee injury, the ACL that he had in last year's Super Bowl, might not be healed in time to help Dallas this season. They're thinking maybe mid-January. Owner Jerry Jones said yesterday that playing this season would be imperative to any deal for Odell Beckham Jr. Lots of baseball news. The Reds were part of the first ever draft lottery last night, and wouldn't you know it, despite having the 4th worst record in all of baseball, they fell all the way to the 7th pick in the draft. The last time they picked 7th, they picked Nick Lodolo out of, where's Nick Lodolo from? TCU, Horned Frogs. Sonny Dykes, leader of men. Have to get that in. The Reds, by the way, have never had the number 1 pick in the draft. The spending spree is in high gear 2 days into the winter meetings. Told you on Sunday the Phillies gave Trey Turner 11 years, $300 million. Then last night they add starting pitcher Taijuan Walker. The National League champs have committed $372 million in cash the last 2 days. Cody Bellinger signs a 1-year deal with the Cubbies, $17 million. Then the Cubs turn around and add pitcher Jameson Taillon, 4-year deal, $68 million. He won 14 with the Yankees last season. Even the Cleveland Guardians are getting in on the mix. They never spend any money. And they reel in Josh Bell. Bell's a player now. Guy can hit. 2 years, $33 million. The big fish out there in the pond was Aaron Judge. Rumors last night, some of the best baseball writers out there saying he was headed to the Giants. But no. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic reporting moments ago the Judge will stay with the Yanks. 9 years, $360 million. Think about that. $40 million a year for 9 years. The Giants didn't get him, so they turned to Mitch Haniger, 3-year contract for better than $14 million a year. This guy has only played in 100 or more games once in the last 3 years. Last year had an ankle injury that kept him out of nearly 3 months of the season. We'll talk about that here momentarily and all the baseball happenings with Hall of Fame broadcaster, my dad, Marty Brennaman. And today is Miller time. No. We're not talking about the champagne of beers. Is there anything better than an ice-cold Miller High Life? No, is the answer. If it's served correctly, and there are only 2 bars in this town that serve Miller High Life the right way. One is the Madeira Inn, one of the old haunts, great spot. And the other actually has a Miller High Life special glass. Is that joint with downtown, the Eagle.
Oh, it's a good spot.
Yeah, great spot, and they serve, neither one are sponsors. We'd welcome your sponsorship. But they serve it up right, and it's got to be just, beyond ice cold to have a Miller High Life. But Miller High Life Day today, because we have both Wes Miller and Sean Miller, thanks to Brandon Seho and Paul Fritchner, lining those guys up. They'll be joining the program shortly. Dozens and dozens of you already on the chat. Casey McAllister, Paul Fritchner, Brandon Seho. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
Doing great. How about you guys?
Fantastic.
Good.
Doing well.
Big day today.
Huge day. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. You and I were talking about it right before we went on the air. I'm really looking forward to this show. I'm a college basketball guy, so naturally, but
now I understand our time with Wes Miller is going to be a little shorter than we thought. That's okay. We appreciate him joining the show. We've got him for about 15, 20 minutes. We'll have Sean Miller for half an hour. Wes is at, I think, 11, right?
11. Sean at
11:30. 11:30. Okay, so that's part of the quote-unquote big interview as we have each and every Wednesday. Is my dad here yet?
He is here.
He's here. Okay. He's back in Cincinnati, Ohio. Look at him there. You went to the Bengals game on Sunday. You're out on Instagram. You're out on all these things. You even had the orange. Did you go buy that orange zip-up that you had on for the game the other day just for the game?
That would be an absolute negative. I had that in my closet, and it had not been worn probably since the last time I was downtown to see the Bengals play at home.
And that, correct me if I'm wrong now, you're talking, there's no way that you have a lot of stuff that's old and tired, but you also have a lot of new stuff that's not so tired. There's no way you had that pullover because, correct me if I'm wrong, the only other Bengals game, you've lived here 50 years almost, and the only other Bengals game you had been to prior to the game on Kansas City on Sunday was what, 1975? Did I read that right?
November 17, 1975, it was the first Monday night game ever played in Cincinnati, and it was between the Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. O.J. Simpson ran for 197 yards on 17 carries, and my main man, Kenny Anderson, threw for 447 yards and a Bengals win. That's the last time.
When you stop and think about that, that was a day and age for Kenny Anderson to have that kind of game. Really, football wasn't played that way in the 1970s. We see guys throw for 300, seemingly, 4 or 5 of them every week, if not more than that.
Very good point.
That's nearly 450 yards. Was your guy Trumpy still playing then, or no?
Oh, yeah, Trumpy caught all of one of those 31 passes that Kenny completed that day. I made a point of checking that. I think it's a travesty he's not in the Hall of Fame. I don't see how. I read an article by which is a Dave Delamalure. It was a lineman
yes.
with the Buffalo Bills.
Joe Delamalure, I think it was.
Joe Delamalure is in the Hall of Fame. And he in the article, he said, it baffles me. Every day I wake up and think about football. I can't help but thinking about the fact that Ken Anderson's not in the Hall of Fame. And he said, I don't understand that. And I don't either. You look at his numbers, and compare them with some of the other quarterbacks that are in that league, and you wonder in the hall how in the world he's not in there.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to happen sooner or later.
I hope so.
I think there are a lot of people out there that feel the same way that you do. We had Paul Daugherty on yesterday, Dad, and he has written for the better part of the last 3 or 4 years how he threw in the towel on his favorite team, the Pittsburgh Pirates, after they traded away a bunch of players years ago, young players that could have been a part of a foundation, and how he now loves baseball, but he doesn't have any more expectations for his favorite team. And he makes the argument that, if you're a Reds fan, you need to alter your expectations and just go enjoy the game. I don't know about you. God bless him for being able to do that. If I'm rooting for a team, man, I'm not going down there just satisfied to be there and watch a sport. I want my team to win, and I'm expecting them to try to compete to win.
No, I don't disagree with what you say, Tom, but at the same time, and I'll give you a good example. I've become an Ohio State football fan over the years. I like the way they play. I've respected the people that they've had coaching there in the years in which I have paid attention to what they have been able to accomplish. And as much as I like to see them win, and as painful as it was for many to watch Michigan beat their brains out, especially in the second half, I don't get the same feeling unless I had a vested interest in the team. Do I want Ohio State to win in football? Yes. Does it pain me to no end when they don't win? No, it doesn't, because I don't have a vested interest. Like going to Chapel Hill a week or so, 2 weeks ago, and watching them get beat by Georgia Tech, which was ridiculous, and it made me mad as hell. But I understand what he says. Oftentimes, I get more enjoyment out of watching a game where I have no rooting interest, one way or the other. And I know what he says, but I think what he says, if you're a Reds fan or you're a Pirates fan, which he once was, or wherever you might live, you can't help but start to pull for that team, and then it pains you more when they don't win.
All these baseball signings, gosh, it doesn't seem that long ago when the Reds and the Angels in the same year, the Cardinals had a decision to make about Albert Pujols. They let him walk out the door. He goes to the Angels 10 years. $250 million. Reds give Joey Votto basically the same contract at $25 million a year. Dad, you got guys like Mitch Haniger, who's a nice player.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden you got a guy like him making $14, $15 million a year. Aaron Judge, it appears, is going for $40 million a year, 9 years to the Yankees.
Yep.
It's just insane. I can't believe it. And when I say it's insane, I always preface by saying, God bless anybody, make as much money as you can. I mean, if you're out there and somebody wants your services and they're willing to pay for it, good for you. But, Dad, I got to tell you, the hope for a number of teams, half the teams, maybe more in the league in years past, maybe you could say we still have hope. It seems like every day that goes by, hope is continuing to disappear for many, many mid to small market teams in this day and age.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think this game is probably more screwed up than any of the major sports. And unfortunately, not being a Rob Manfred fan, nor have I ever been a Rob Manfred fan, it blows my mind how he keeps his damn job and makes the money he makes, because I really don't think, and it may be unfair to say that, he's not doing his job because he can't figure out a way to right this ship to some extent. And because maybe there is no way. I don't know. But all I know is the salaries continue to go up and up and up. And the more it goes up, the more it hurts clubs like this one and so many others, the Minnesotas and the Tampa Bays and the Pittsburgh Pirates, and you go on, Kansas City. I don't know what the answer is. But all I see is a lot of talking from the commissioner and his minions, and not a hell of a lot of work being done to try and figure out how to right this thing. I've often said the greatest commissioner in the history of professional sports was Pete Rozelle. because he had the wisdom and the foresight back in the 60s to implement a financial plan that has worked wonders as far as the National Football League is concerned. Not a commissioner in baseball, not a commissioner in the NBA or the NHL or any of those sports ever came up with a plan that Pete Rozelle did as far as revenue sharing is concerned. I've had people all the time talk about salary caps and why can't baseball implement a salary cap? The best thing they've been able to do is the luxury tax. And you know what? That hadn't really worked because it doesn't deter the big money teams like the Yankees from giving Aaron Judge 9 years and $360 million, and Hal Steinbrenner on the heels of that salary being paid out over the next 9 years to Aaron Judge, saying we still have plenty of money more to put us back in a position where we can more adequately challenge Houston and win the American League pennant and probably the World Series. So I just scratch my head in wonderment at the predicament that baseball finds itself in, and even more so in how in the world they're ever going to figure out a way to get out of it.
Well, Dad, and you know this better than anybody because you've been around forever, the sport. When you mention those two words, and look, Scott Boras, I know you don't like the guy. He has been great to me. He's come on my podcast twice. We're going to have him again on the show once we get through all of this madness and free agency and so on and so forth. Look, he's a very smart guy. He's a very successful guy. His clients love him. I mean, they love him. And why wouldn't you? But the second you bring up the two words salary cap to Scott Boras, and he's not alone, many, many others, players union, that kind of thing, all the conversation ends. And in talking with Tracy Jones, in a serious note for a change yesterday, he made the point that, Boras would say, and I've heard him say, that salaries are actually going down because what's happened is you have the mega guys right up here. You have the minimum salary guys way down here, and these guys in the middle have basically been cut out. So when you factor all of that in, you probably do come up with, and it's been proven, that the salaries on average have come down a little bit the last couple of years. But look, we all know that's nothing more than eyewash. And I just wonder when the day is going to come, is it ever going to come? You've probably been asking the same question for 45 years. Is there ever going to come a day where there are enough of the rank and file in the union to say, look, boys, if we want this sport to survive outside of maybe 7 or 8 or 9 cities in the country, we've got to give serious consideration to going to the owners to say, hey, look, maybe we'll think about salary cap as long as you guys are on board for revenue sharing.
I don't think you can discount the possibility that that's going to occur, but I think it's going to take a large number of players at the big league level with a certain intellectual mentality to realize that this type of thing has to occur for the future of the game. I don't know, quite honestly, that you have guys that want to get involved in it. I don't think you have guys like Bob Boone around anymore, who was a part of the executive committee back when major inroads were being made shortly after the player union was formed. But it's going to take exactly what you said, active players that can look down the road and see that the road's end will be one of disaster and have to get people to sit down and realize that there were going to be major concessions made in order to bring about a rosy future for the game of baseball. You hear people talk about nobody ever puts names to it. But I've read a number of times over the last year where there have been people who, whether they are in the know, apparently they are, who have said that the fan will never know how close certain clubs have come to bankruptcy. And I believe that. I truly, truly believe that has happened. And whether or not it's been rectified by Major League Baseball bailing teams out that were badly in need of money, but if there's only been one that's occurred with, then that should be a wake-up call for Manfred and his minions to sit down with baseball ownership and baseball's union and say, boys, we got to figure out a way to make this thing work, because right now this formula, if you can call it that, has failed miserably, and we've got to look toward a brighter day with some smarter minds involved.
Dad, I don't know what you say, if you're Bob Castellini, or if you're the owner of the Pirates, or you're the owner of the Royals, or, whoever, right? These teams that basically when the season starts,
yeah,
you're not going to compete with these big market teams. Outside of an outlier here and there. There's always one every so often. But the bottom line is, in the argument I make to all the guys that say out there, especially the analytic freaks, look, this team did this and this team. I said, look, outside of the Kansas City Royals in the last 2 decades, find me a team from a mid-market, small market that have won the World Series. That was the Kansas City Royals a number of years ago when they caught lightning in a bottle, had all those young players together, played great, made a deal here, deal there near the end. They win the whole thing. But, if you're the Bob Castellinis of the world, and I don't mean just talking specifically about him, but how do you go to your fan base and say, hey, come on out to the ballpark, even though we know we have no chance? He can't say that. But how do you sell people, and you're selling your product no different than Procter & Gamble or Coca-Cola or UDF or whatever? How do you sell it?
I don't know how you sell it. I feel for those people down there that are trying to come up with some type of promotional concept that will enable people to buy into it. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest now. I mean, we have dyed-in-the-wool fans, and I know some of them that are going to go down there and watch this team play, win or lose, and win or lose over a period of years. They're still going to go down there because they're huge Reds fans, and they're also huge baseball fans. But at the end of the day, the majority of people are front runners. And if you win, they'll knock the doors down. And if you don't win, then they're going to come occasionally, but not nearly with the passion and fervor that they would normally if they going down on a given day and have great expectation that that team is going to win. I mean, look at the Bengals. I sat there and marveled at that stadium on Sunday, and how the one thing that I'd never expected, because as I said, I'd been away for so long, is the noise never stops. These people are so into it. Why are they into it? They're into it, one, because this team wins. Why does this team win? It wins because of Joe Burrow and a stable of receivers that are gifted beyond anybody's expectation, and an offensive line that's coming together, and a defensive secondary that's playing better than it's played all year long. That's the reason why those people are there. They go down expecting them to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And they go down expecting them to beat the Cleveland Browns on Sunday. And down the road, the Buffalo Bills. That's what winning is all about. And that's the biggest I'll never forget Roger Rule, who was the marketing director when I came with this club in 1974. And I think Roger was the one that people praised him for his promotions and everything. He said, let me tell you what the best promotion on earth is. And that's winning. And that's exactly right. So short of that, I don't know what you say to fans.
When you look at some of the moves that have been made, all big market teams outside of the Josh Bell. That Josh Bell thing, by the way, stunned me. I don't know if it stunned you, because Cleveland is one of those teams, even though they find a way to win a lot of games. Great manager, great farm system. They bring up pitchers in mass, it seems like, every 2, 3, 4 years, and just replace the next guy, the next guy, the next guy. I was stunned by the Josh Bell thing. 2 years, $33 million to go to Cleveland.
I know. It's mind-blowing. Well, he was with San Diego last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And Josh Bell, he's a nice player. I mean, but nice is about the best I can give him. And once again, though, that points up what we were talking about a short time ago about the salaries. And see, this is the part where I disagree with the Antichrist. That would be Scott Boras. He talks about there's no middle class. The hell it isn't, because every time salaries go up for the big dogs, those guys that would be categorized as middle of the road or middle class players, their salaries are going up also. Now, they're not going up to the tune of what the megastars are getting, but every time those guys' contracts jump, so do the guys in the middle class. You telling me Josh Bell's a whole lot better than a middle class player? I would tell you you're crazy.
Well, I just don't. I mean, I'm almost at a loss for words in watching what's going on here because, you know, whether we've talked the last few days, Dad, about Philadelphia, huge market, Giants, huge market, Yankees, outside of the Bell deal, there has been nothing of significance made by 90% of the teams, and I throw the Cubs in that group because they just signed Cody Bellinger, who I think the guy's a stiff. He had 1 year and great year MVP, but outside of that, before it and after it, I think the guy's a stiff. But Turner leaves and goes to Philadelphia. You wonder about the Dodgers. I know they gave Clayton Kershaw $20 million a year, and they've still got a lot of good players, but I think we all agree that Turner was their best player. And now to have him walk out the door, you know, it makes me kind of scratch my head a little bit about what's going on with him.
Well, I've got faith in the Dodgers. I you know, whether or not they are able to recover from losing Trey Turner, who I thought was one of the top 3 or 4 players in the National League. I mean, that Trey Turner can do everything. And I don't think Trey Turner left L.A. out of a sense of not liking it there. I think he left there out of a sense of wanting to get back to the East Coast, where he and his wife are from. He went to NC State, was a fine player there. I think they will figure out some way to, if not completely recover from the loss of Trey Turner, they'll figure out a way to make it happen. I think Dodgers and the Yankees, I thought Boston. I think there's certain upper echelon teams, and I think if you say who are they? Well, the first 2 names come up are the Dodgers and the Yankees. I don't think there's any question about that. So I don't worry about the Dodgers, and I think they'll figure out a way to recover from the loss of Trey Turner and move on.
You know, I sit there, Dad, and I wonder, you know, is this like a housing market or a stock market bubble? Does this thing sooner or later pop? Because you tell me if you agree with this. Excuse me. I think the biggest single issue, and it's starting to get some pub, Manfred had to address it yesterday at the winter meetings. I think the biggest single topic facing this sport is what might happen with these regional sports networks. There's talk that Bally's, which you watch the Reds games, they own, I think it is, Bally has the rights between baseball, the NBA, and the NHL. I think has 64 different teams it has the rights to. Those are contractual obligations. Whatever the Reds deal is, just pick a number. Say it's $30 million a year, $20 million a year for the TV deal. Doesn't matter what it is. Point is, television is the biggest single sponsor locally and nationally for every single Major League Baseball team. There is talk, there's a possibility that this company is going to run out of money at the end of 2023. And I have to believe that more than anything going on, the rule changes, the salaries, the big money, all this sort of stuff, the lack of fan interest, that has to be the scariest thing in the minds on Park Avenue.
Agree 100%. I read a long piece about the financial situation dealing with Valley Sports on The Athletic last week. And it's not a pretty picture at all. I mean, this is an outfit that became overextended financially in their haste to be recognized as the single biggest rights holder there is in professional sports. And you're right. This will all of a sudden become priority number one if at some point this whole thing goes under, because I don't know what baseball would do. I'm sure Rob Manfred has discussed this with his people ad nauseum, and I would have to think that they know a hell of a lot more about this whole situation than we do, and how far along it is, and whether or not it's feasible that it could go under. And if that's the case, and sometimes I give them more credit for having more sense than they do, They have to be better prepared and have some inkling about what they're going to do if one day Bally Sports walks into Rob Manfred's office and said, here's the key to the kingdom. We don't want it anymore. It's scary. It truly is scary. And again, I go back to the fact that the formula for success, you don't see the NFL worrying about this. That guy's got the greatest job on earth, Roger Goodell.
Yeah.
You know it better than me because you worked in that league for so long. But they don't have problems like that. And that's all baseball's got. Worrying about whether or not the rights holder of all rights holders is one day going to say, we can't do it anymore. We don't have any money. We're out of money. That's the most frightening thing. And you're 100% right of all the other things that are being discussed and implemented in the game of baseball today, rules changes and whatnot. What's going to happen if Bally Sports goes belly up?
All right, I want to shift gears to a second. You've been around for almost 50 of these crosstown shootouts. It's this Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We have both Wes Miller, who's a proud alumnus of your university,
yes,
the University of North Carolina.
My man.
And playing against, of course, I know another guy you like very much is Sean Miller. Xavier Musketeers. This game this year will be played at UC. Full house, everybody fired up. What are your thoughts on the crosstown shootout, if any?
To begin with, you're right. I'm a fan of both coaches. I guess I'm a bit more prejudiced for Wes because Wes was at Carolina. His story is great. How he came there and he was a walk-on and the thought about transferring and his dad told him, you're not going anywhere. You want to be a coach down the road. You can't learn from anybody better than you can Roy Williams. So you're going to go back. Well, then he comes back. He wins the scholarship. And at the end of the day, he's starting for, I think, a national championship team or one that went to the Final Four. And a great guy. Wes Miller and then Sean Miller, he just put his track record up. That's all you need to know about him. I got to give the nod to Xavier, but having said that, if this is a day in which Wes's kids are making their shots, their outside shots, then they can beat Xavier, and I think it'll be a good game unless they simply can't make their shots. Their whole game, I think, is predicated on opening up their offense, and the way you do that is make your shots from the outside. This is a rivalry. People talk about Duke and Carolina, and I think that and Michigan and Ohio State are the two greatest college rivalries that exist today. But you don't have another rivalry in the country in any city where the two teams are in the same town. What about Arizona? That's in the same state, Arizona State. I don't know that it's quite as the spirit is quite as high as it used to be when you had coaches that didn't like each other.
Yeah, no way.
I think probably the two guys coaching these teams like each other. And when Huggs was there and Pete Gillen was there, and some of the other coaches that went head to head, we both can remember when the fight created a situation where people were wondering if this game would ever be played again.
Yep.
Thank God that's no longer a problem. But I think it's a great time of the year. You and I both love college basketball. I think a game like this is wonderful for the city, and I think it's wonderful as long as people's tempers don't get the best of them, and all of a sudden it becomes an ugly situation.
I mean, highfalutin guy like you, you're sitting up there in the skybox for the Bengalis v. Chiefs. I mean, I couldn't get a ticket. I tried like crazy to buy tickets and couldn't get them. Big shot like you's in the skybox. I assume you're going to the shootout, sitting in a skybox again?
I am not.
Really?
No. No, as much as I enjoyed going down there on Sunday, at my age, 80 years old, and fighting crowds and trying to find where the hell you're going. And I told Amanda, I said, did you enjoy it? She said, yeah. I said, well, have a great memory. Ain't happening again. I don't think
Fellas,
so.
the ham and eggers, you have anything for Marty Brennaman before we let him go?
I mean, I do. Casey, you can go first if you want.
No, go ahead.
Marty, I got to ask you real quick. I know Armando Bacot didn't play, but North Carolina, how are we getting back on the right track here?
You know what, Paulie, I don't know, man. I got a guy who's sort of jumping my ass because I'm critical of the Carolina program. He went to Carolina. He lives in Liberty Township. And he says, you're hurting our university, hurting my university, my rear end. All of a sudden, this game has changed now because these guys are paid athletes. So if I want to be critical of them, I'm going to be critical of them. I'm concerned about the direction right now that Hubert Davis has taken this team because it looks like he has no idea what to do. I mean, game after game, they've lost 4 games in a row. Game after game, they go out. They throw the ball up from the outside. Now, granted, Bacot did not play against Virginia Tech, and that's a major hit. But it still did not change the way they approached the game. You got 2 guards that couldn't score in an empty gym. Caleb Love, 13 for 37 2 games ago. Somebody said, Michael Jordan, what would Michael Jordan think about a Carolina guard that shot 36 times and made 13 of them? I don't know. I don't know. They got Georgia Tech this weekend. They've had a week to get healthy with Bacot. So I just hope every game that comes up, something happens to turn them around. But a team is talented. A lot of people will tell you they don't have a lot of talent. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I appreciate you asking me the question. I knew you were chomping at the bit because all these Carolina people that know that I'm a Carolina fan, they love to stick the needle into me. Because they know that now this is a team that I do live and die with. I live and die with their football and basketball teams.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you've been on the bandwagon on the football thing. I mean, let's be honest about it here. Until Mac Brown came back, you had checked out on their football team for a long time.
Pretty much.
And look, I don't blame you.
Pretty much.
Okay. Casey.
Yeah.
So all I got to say, I just looked at the schedule. 1 month from now, my Notre Dame Fighting Leprechauns go down to North Carolina. I'm excited. They're the 2 really good teams going at it.
You going to be watching it on television, clown?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will be.
The way those 2 teams are going, it
fan.
might not be on TV. You might have to find it somewhere streaming.
Yeah, probably.
By the way, Casey, I'm a big fan of Mike Bray.
Yeah.
Big fan of Mike Bray. Think he's a good coach.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Does that make you happy?
Yeah, it makes me happy.
He doesn't even know who Mike Bray is. We spun a wheel to find out what team he was going to. He couldn't tell you Mike Bray in a lineup of 1 against that wall over there.
I'm learning.
I'm sorry to hear about that, Casey.
You're open to learning, though, Casey. That's why we love you.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Right. That's right. All right, Dad, thanks. You got it all covered today. We appreciate the time.
All right, boys. We'll talk to you next week. Have a good week.
All righty.
See you,
How about
Marty.
that? I mean, does it get any better than that, really, at the end of the day?
Yeah, that was great.
You get a guy, a lot of times we talk about how when we bring people on, I'm not going to ask them certain – it's like today. Just let me tell you ahead of time, okay? I'm not getting into today with Sean Miller any of the parts about him leaving Arizona. It's just not happening, okay? So if you're expecting it as part of the big interview, and we ask a lot of tough questions with some guys, we did with Hugs last week, but we're not going down that road today. So if that's what you're looking for, check out. But the one beauty of Marty Brennaman is, among many, is that, you ask a question, you better be ready for the answer.
Absolutely.
You may not like it.
He speaks the truth.
Big fan of both Rob Manfred and Scott Boras.
Huge.
He and I go back and forth about Boras all the time. When I was a very young man, I'll never forget as long as I live. I'm announcing the Cubs games, and the Cubs are in Pittsburgh. I think this was in 1991, 92, something like that. And I'm announcing the games, and on the field before the game, the Cubs general manager at the time, a guy named Larry Himes, announced that the Cubs had made their last offer to Maddox. He had turned it down, and he was going to become a free agent at the end of the year. So I go on the air that night and rip Greg Maddux, who I thought the world of as a guy. Not him personally, but just the whole thing and leaving and the contract and blah, blah, blah. I get back to my hotel room after the game, and the phone rings in my room, and I answer it, and it's Scott Boras, who is Greg Maddux's agent. And we have a very long conversation about, because WGN was a superstation in those days, so you could watch Cub games anywhere really in the world, going down into Latin America and all this kind of thing. Anyway, it was on all over the United States as a superstation, them and TBS in those days. It was like a national job. And so I had said the same thing on television that I'd said on radio, switching back and forth with Harry Carey. And Scott and I had a long conversation about the whole thing. Laid all the cards on the table. I appreciated his call. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And ever since then, every time I've seen him, we have a very nice professional relationship. I do my podcast over on the Believe Network, where it's an interview every single week. He's been on the show twice. We've probably had about 50 episodes. He's been kind enough to come on. We're going to get him on this show once we get through all of this madness. And I like him. I don't agree with everything he does, but I think for what he does for a living, if you're a client of his, I mean, you're all in. You're all in. Because at the end of the day, when you're one of these guys, you want to know that somebody is going to bat for you. And they're all in for you and your family and your future and your career. I mean, this operation Boras runs out there in California, you've never seen anything like it. It's about 35,000 square feet right there in either Huntington Beach or, no, it's not Huntington Beach. It's right there. What's a famous place right there? In
Santa Monica?
No. Further south in Orange County. Anyway, I mean, you ought to see this layout. I mean, workout stuff. He's got mental health people that work with the athletes, physical stuff, spiritual stuff. I mean, he's
Newport
got it.
Beach.
What's that?
Newport Beach.
Newport Beach. There we go. And that's highfalutin. Big time highfalutin.
Tom, we have some major breaking news,
What's
actually.
that?
We almost interrupted the Marty Brennaman interview.
Oh, wow. What is it?
Sonny Dykes extended through 2028.
There's only one thing to say before we go to break. Two things to say before we go to break. Go Frogs! Sonny Dykes, leader of men, defeat Michigan. Defeat Michigan. Back in a moment.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time. And if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Swinney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Swinney, the original used car superstore.
also when I lost in Anaheim, my dad was at the game, and my dad was down and out and sad. And see, back then the older generation, a lot of times they would use negative motivation as like you can't do this or hey man, you won't do that. Where nowadays you can't use negative motivation, to the young kids, because a lot of them would just sit out on you and quit. You know what I mean? So my dad, never forget, and I've told people this. He told me, he said, "Son, I don't know if you'll ever win one, a pennant or not. We didn't win it that year in San Francisco because we had them down. You know what I mean? And he says, I don't know if you'll ever win one, after this." And that's the first thing that I thought about, was say, "Hey, Dad, you're wrong again." I mean, I love it. I swear that's the first thing I thought about. Dad, you're wrong.
Everybody wants to say, "Dad, you're wrong," right? There's 2 beds in that room. All right, welcome back to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. The big interviews, as in plural, coming up at 11 o'clock today. We have Wes Miller, head basketball coach at the University of Cincinnati. Sean Miller, head basketball coach at Xavier University.
We got a few minutes to kill here, so we have something for you.
Ooh.
Bring it up, Casey.
Oh, boy, here we go, Case.
Here we go, folks. The new stink list.
All right, so again, for those of you who are regulars, you know the drill. If you're not, this is basically moving left to right, top to bottom. The overall rankings, according to Casey McAllister, we call it his stink list, where he has title towns, teams that could win a Super Bowl, borderline good, knocking on the door, borderline stink, and then the Browns. All right, so we start with so in other words, Casey, your top 5, Power 5 in order, right there as we see it.
Yep.
Eagles, Buffalo, Bengalis leapfrog Kansas City, and then the Dallas Football Cowboys, correct?
Yep, and I really wanted to leapfrog the Bills with the Bengals. I really wanted to put Eagles and Bengals up there. I think those 2 teams are the best, but I think the matchup between the Bills and the Bengals is different than the Bills and the Chiefs. And I think the Bills' defensive line, the defensive front, is so much better and can get after the quarterback, and I think that's a real issue. The Chiefs' defensive line is just not as good.
Tell you what, I was surprised, though, listening last night. I was surprised listening to Dave Lapham a little bit. I think it was Monday night. Mm-hmm. And we'll get back to the list here in a second because I got a couple questions for you about this thing.
Yep.
By some metric, I'm not sure what it was, that Kansas City was like in the top 7 or 8 as far as quarterback pressures in the NFL this year.
Right.
And look, Carlos Dunlop has had his moments. All about Jones. Bengals did a beautiful job. And credit to Zach Taylor and Callahan for the way they handled Jones in that game. Clark has missed a lot of time. He came back, but a good pass rusher. So, kudos to the Bengals there. I'm with you, though, on Buffalo. I just think their overall defense is a far more physical, tough, get after people, and that's a reflection of the coach. Sean McDermott was a defensive guy his whole career before coming to Buffalo as head coach.
Yeah,
all right. So the next line, I'm very surprised. Well, I'm not. That's not the word. I'm not surprised the Niners with the Garoppolo thing. I think with him, they're in that top tier. Maybe you disagree. Minnesota has the second best record in the NFL.
Yeah, but, they showed that when they play in prime time, they get obliterated. And that's why Dallas is a title town and the Vikings are where they're at.
If every game was played at 1 o'clock, the Vikings would be number 1.
Maybe.
I don't know how you can argue that, Casey.
Here's the thing. Statistically, they are the worst. Like, they're just terrible. They're one of the worst top teams in the league, and it's like
true.
No contest. Their defense ranks 31st in yards given up. Their offense is only like 19th.
Bringing stats to the table.
And so, to me, I've been down on the Vikings this whole time. They just keep winning games, and that's what matters in the end. But
that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. But to me, this team is a fraud.
Okay.
And when they go and play a primetime game for their playoff, it's not going to be pretty.
I tell you, the team that to me, I keep expecting them to fall off the ledge, and then they come out with a big win, and that's Seattle. You know, the whole Geno Smith thing, it's an interesting team because they got a great coach. I mean, make no mistake about it. You combine college and pro and the history of football. Pete Carroll is a great football coach. And so he's kind of held that thing together. When you think about the fact that they let Russell Wilson go, they give Geno Smith a chance, he's doing what he's doing, and just when you think, loss here, don't look so good there, they come up, win another big game. All right, so you've got them. Then you have the borderline sting. The last time I checked, the Baltimore Ravens are in front of the Cincinnati Bengals as leaders of the AFC. It's just the last time I checked, Casey, and that would have been today.
They almost lost.
Last time I checked.
They almost lost.
Again,
to one of the worst
almost
teams in
means
the NFL.
nothing. They won the game.
Barely.
They're 8-4.
They're better with a backup quarterback in. I'll put it like that.
You have teams up there that are not even in first place. Is that accurate? No, the Bengals are not in first. Dallas is not in first. No. Buffalo is now the top seed in the AFC. Minnesota's in first. Miami is technically tied, right?
Oh, you mean in their divisions?
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have the Ravens. They're the only division lead. Well, Tampa Bay, but that doesn't really count. And Tennessee.
Because the Ravens are frauds. They're frauds. And the exact same thing that happened last year is going to happen again. They're going to be competitive in their games, but still lose 4 in a row with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, especially now when they have no receivers, and Tyler Huntley is no Lamar Jackson.
Well, you heard Brian Billick say the other day he's done all the film work for Ravens.com.
And I would agree.
He says, obviously, he can't run, who can run, except for Justin Fields, like Lamar Jackson, but he thinks Huntley's better in the pocket.
I don't disagree with that. I think that the team itself would be better last year with Tyler Huntley. They would have probably done a lot better if Tyler Huntley started every game last season. But this team has no receivers. Everyone's getting dinged up. They rely too much on their run game, and their defense is too unreliable. That is a recipe for them to, they're out. They're frauds. Just the same with the Vikings. They're the same sort of issues there that I'm just like, these guys are frauds. Just give it till the end of the season, and you'll see. I'm surprised you didn't say anything about the Titans still being.
You know what? I'm not, because they're not playing like the team we saw playing Green Bay a couple weeks ago. And primarily that is because the Bengals and then the Philadelphia Eagles, their last two opponents, have completely, thoroughly, utterly shut down Derrick Henry. Henry ran for 38 against the Bengals. It was less than that against Philadelphia. If the Titans can't run it. And I've said before, we argued. I thought Tannehill was better than you guys think he is, okay? Yeah. But that is based strictly upon the ability of the Tennessee Titans to be able to run the ball. And right now, they can't run the ball.
Nope. And here's a thought that I had as of late, and people are not going to like this. But the Steelers and the Lions, those teams are on the up and up. And I think
wow, you said something nice about Kenny Pickett?
Well, he still is developing. But the signs of life on their defense is just as good as the 49ers when they're fully healthy. And I don't think I don't think you can have an argument there. When they have all four of their defensive linemen together, TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, Ogunjobi, and Highsmith, Highsmith, those guys get after you and they disrupt and they just feed life into the defense.
Well, Mike Tomlin made the comment before the game last week, which the Steelers won again. Wasn't pretty, beat Atlanta. He made the comment that he is really excited about Kenny Pickett. Now, I mean, what else is a guy going to say? But he was pretty effusive in his praise, obviously developing a ways to go, but he likes the grittiness and the toughness and the leadership of Pickett. They knew all these things when they brought him in, but you really never know until you got to get a guy in practice every day. And we've talked with this about Brian Billick every week when he joins us, is that, you have to really be around a guy every single day. And a quarterback, you're expecting to be a leader. And in a short amount of time, Pickett has them thinking it may not be too long before the Steelers, who traditionally are not bad for long through the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
They find a way to get it together.
And let's be clear, he's not winning a shootout with Joe Burrow.
Not yet.
I don't think he ever will. I don't think he ever will.
I'm not going to say never because I don't know. I'm not going to say never. I'm not going to say never.
That's fair. Joe Burrow is a special type of talent, and that's where I'm getting at. It's kind of like, do you think Andy Dalton could be Tom Brady? And no, I don't think so. And I feel like Kenny Pickett might turn out to be like an Andy Dalton for them.
Okay.
And that's not bad.
No, in fact, it's very good. I mean, with all the stuff about prime time and everything, I mean, Andy Dalton, his first 5 years in the league, led this team to the playoffs. And there are a lot of teams. In fact, I think he and Joe Flacco were the first two guys did it simultaneously to do that. You know where Andy Dalton went to college, don't you?
TCU. Horned Frogs.
You know what happened to TCU today, don't you, men? Sonny Dykes.
Extended Sonny Dykes.
I tell you what, it's going to be really interesting, and UC fans, you're going in the Big 12 next year. This Sonny Dykes thing, there's no way anybody saw this coming. Not even Sonny Dykes saw this coming. They were picked to finish 7th in the Big 12 this year. But you think the difference in 1 year, what that could mean to that program. I mean, Gary Patterson had them for a long time up there. Couldn't beat the big boys. They did win a Rose Bowl. I think they beat Wisconsin 1 year when Dalton was there. But you think about in 1 year, they hire him as a head coach. They go undefeated during the regular season. They play for the Big 12 championship game. They're in the college football playoff. And now all of a sudden, he's given a contract, would you say, through 28?
Yep.
You imagine the recruiting that Sonny Dykes is going to be able to do? Because believe me when I tell you, boys and girls, and my dad would tell you the same thing because he said it to me when he went to visit our daughter down at TCU. You get a kid on campus at TCU, and now all of a sudden you throw in all those things that I just said in regards to football and basketball and all the money they're pouring into that thing. You get a kid on campus at TCU, you're going to have a hard time saying no if you're the kid to not playing there. It's that nice and rabid. All right, we ready to go?
We're going to go to a really quick break. Wes is in here. We're going to go to a really quick break.
And then Wes Miller coming up right after this timeout.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time. And if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
There's 2 double beds.
Boy, your
in that room. Jim wants to know, said it kind of reminds me of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson on Dennis the Menace. There are a lot of people wondering, what's going on down there. Because you've been very hard on Danae on this program. I mean, you have worn her out when it comes to her choice of accommodations on places where you guys have been staying, whether it was down in Mexico. Right. I think you referred to that 6-star resort as a dump. And then you went on to say that the house you rented down on the Gulf side of Florida here the last couple of weeks was also a dump. Anything you want to share, or would you just rather stay away from that topic?
No, we were catching a situation. There's no doubt about it. But, Casey, this is what you have to look forward to when you're married for 13 years. You see that? No action, pulling no wool, and then going back, pulling no wool. So 13 years of marriage, that's what it gets you. 2 separate queen beds. And you know who Tucker slept with last night? Danae. I'm all by myself, and don't think I'm not going to go to that Taylor Swift concert and get me some phone numbers so I can get a Mrs. Jones number 3, because I will. I ain't messing around.
I did T.J. Watt last night. I hope T.J. Watt likes eating grass because I fed him like a mule when Lyle Collins was laying on his back. We like pancakes, and I put syrup on that boy. I fed that man. Put syrup on him. That's what we doing. We're pancaking the league this year, baby. Let's go.
That's Zim Uday. I mean, does it get any better than that guy? Look at him. That's a real fan. It's a real man. I love that guy.
Also, when I lost in Anaheim, my dad was at the game, and my dad was down and out and sad. And see, back then, the older generation, a lot of times they would use negative motivation as like you can't do this or hey man, you won't do that. Where nowadays you can't use negative motivation, to the young kids, because a lot of them would just sit out on you and quit. You know what I mean?
Dusty Baker, World Series champion. A lot of talk about the Astros. They've already added to that lineup. And apparently want to spend some more money. Did Sore Boy wonder, just fill me in here on the chat, that the Mets, another big market team, signed Quintana, starting pitcher, 2 years, $26 million.
Did you see somebody made a comment about Justin Verlander going to the Mets, and somebody commented and goes, does he know he can sign with a team that doesn't have orange in his color palette?
Yeah, that's right. First time he's a full-time National Leaguer.
There we go.
So interesting. All right. We mentioned today's Miller Time. Kind enough to be joined by both Wes Miller, head coach at the University of Cincinnati, Sean Miller, coming up in about a half hour. Wes, thanks so much for taking the time. I know the demands on your time right now have to just be nonstop in getting ready for this game. It's your second time through this game. What's this week like for you at UC?
Well, it's an exciting week because you can feel the energy around town. You can feel the energy on campus for the crosstown shootout. But it's business as usual, right? It's obviously a big-time game, the kind of game that, you grow up wanting to play in, that you grow up wanting to coach in. And, And certainly we're going to recognize that, but it's business as usual about getting in the gym every day, trying to get better and take steps. And, starting tomorrow, we'll begin our preparation as a team. That's what we usually do, a 2-day prep for every game. So it's business as usual, but the feeling around the game does, make it for a little bit of a different week.
You grew up in North Carolina. We'll get to this in a second. You played at the University of North Carolina after transferring from James Madison. But when you got the job, Coach, prior to last year, did you really know anything about this rivalry? I mean, it's on national TV every year and so forth, but you're busy coaching a team down in Greensboro. And did anything strike you as being different than any other sort of rivalry you've been a part of?
Of course, I was aware of it. I've been a lifelong basketball fan, just a lifelong college basketball fan, and it's one of the best rivalries in sports, right? So I was very aware of it. I'd watched it over the years, but participating in it last year, it gave me a different level of appreciation for it. I mean, you have two schools that are in the same community. As we all know here in Cincinnati, this is a sports town with passionate sports fans. So you have two high-level basketball programs in the same community, a mile and some change apart. It's very, very unique. I mean, very, very unique. And the intensity of it, I mean, you mentioned my background. I was fortunate to play in the Duke, North Carolina game, I think 8 times or something like that. And that's obviously a well-documented college basketball rivalry. This one feels more intense. And I think because it's two schools that are right here in the same community, I think that's where it's very different.
I think you just collectively took the breath away from our audience when you said you think it might be more intense in Duke, North Carolina. For all of us, on the outside looking in, you look at that thing, whether it's at the Dean Dome or at Cameron Indoor Stadium, and you're thinking, man, does it get any more intense than that?
Yeah, I was a player in one, and I've coached in the other one now. So you got to put that in perspective a little bit. But, like Duke and North Carolina gets such national attention. I mean, it really does. And you can sense that when you're a part of it. Everybody kind of stops all over the country, wherever you are, and watches that game. I think this game should get that kind of attention. It doesn't necessarily get it nationally, but locally it does feel more intense. And I'll say it again. I mean, Durham and Chapel Hill are 8 miles apart, but they are two different communities. They're two different cities or towns. And, Xavier and Cincinnati are right here in Cincinnati. Yeah. And they're a mile apart. And there's an intensity that you feel locally, that you feel, last year in Xavier's arena. I know it'll be that way in Fifth Third on Saturday, that I just felt I'd never been a part of before. And I think that's really special.
Coach, I want to go back just for a minute or two, if you don't mind, before we let you get out of here. And you grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. You go to James Madison, and now you transfer to North Carolina, and you're going to go there to try and walk on as a player. Roy Williams was the head coach. There aren't a lot of walk-ons, Coach, I don't need to tell you, that make a major Division I college basketball team and program. Did you think you had a legitimate shot to make the team there?
Well, yeah, I was recruited as I was a recruited walk-on, a recruited non-scholarship player. So I went there knowing that I'd be on the team.
Okay.
I think the bigger part to the story, not to get too much into my playing days, gosh, that feels like ancient history now. But the bigger part to the story is that, I wanted to play, and I wanted to make sure there was an opportunity to play. And I believed that I could play. And Roy Williams, who's been an incredible mentor to me, I'll never forget how honest he was during that recruiting process. He was honest that no matter what, I'd be a part of the team, and that would help me get into coaching later in my life, which really turned out to be true. But that he couldn't guarantee I'd ever play, but if I was good enough, I would. And, fortunately, I got some breaks and ended up starting as a junior and earning a scholarship and having a respectable playing career. So that was the part that was probably a little less predictable, but I was fortunate it worked out in that way.
Wes, the coaching style, Roy Williams, of course, mentored by the legendary late, great Dean Smith. Roy is your mentor in many ways, not saying exclusively he is, but obviously a huge part an influence on your life as both a player, a coach, and a man. As human beings, Dean Smith and Roy Williams were two guys, look, nobody's perfect. Lord knows that. But they're guys you can really look up to. And their coaching styles compared to, just like life, right? You got one spectrum on the other, compared to, say, Bobby Knight, compared to, say, Bob Huggins, compared to, say, somebody else. It is a very different coaching style. It would seem to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, that style with kids today is perhaps a little more positive than maybe it may have been a number of years ago. You know what I'm getting at when I ask that question?
You're saying Coach Smith and Coach Williams style maybe makes more sense today?
Well, I'm just saying, you're not, and you don't do it either. I mean, those aren't the kind of guys that would just blister guys up one side and down the other. And we had Coach Huggins on last week where he still believes kids really want to be coached and coached hard, and you can get on their tail and all that kind of stuff. But just being around, and my kids getting through high school here in the last year or two are still in high school, it seems like a lot of those kids don't want to be coached hard anymore. And I'm not suggesting Williams and Dee didn't coach them hard. It's just a different style. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think I know, kind of how to put it in perspective for you. I believe what Coach Huggins said. There are still young people out there that want to be held to the highest standard. They want to be coached hard. They want somebody to demand that of them. I think kids now just want to know that you also care deeply about them. They want to know that it's bigger than basketball. But I think, the generation is different in a lot of ways. But I think if they feel that you have genuine care for them as young people, as human beings, as basketball players, they still want to be held to really, really high standards. I think with Coach Smith and Coach Williams, maybe on the sideline when the cameras were on, it maybe didn't feel like they were coaching as hard. They did a lot of that in practice. And I didn't play for Coach Smith. I was very fortunate to get to know him well. He was still in the office every day when I was playing at Carolina, and got to know him very well. But I've learned a lot about him. And obviously my 4 years for Coach Williams and all the time I've spent with him, all that all shuck stuff he would talk about in his interviews. Man, don't get it twisted. He could undress you in practice, and he was very demanding and very difficult to play for. And I've always been told, Coach Smith in the same way. The one thing I took from Coach Williams was that I've tried to really apply to how demanding I can be as a coach is he would never demean a player personally. He could make you feel this big by how you were playing or the things you were doing. But he would never demean anybody personally. He might say that was a really stupid play, but he would never say you're really stupid. Mm-hmm. And that's something that always resonated with me, and something I've always tried to do in my young coaching careers. Be really demanding, demand really high standards, be tough on kids, love kids hard, but never attack somebody personally for something that's going on the basketball court.
Where are you, Coach, in the state of UC basketball? For those who follow the program, have been around this town forever, you went through the Gail Catlett stuff, then you have some down years probation. Hugs comes in, gets the whole thing rolling. Mick does a really nice job there after Hugs. And then, they had the turmoil just prior to your arrival. The state of UC basketball from where you sit as the head man right now is what?
Well, I think obviously coming in here, a year and a half ago now, late in the spring, the program wasn't in a great spot. I think everybody knows that. I certainly knew that when I took the job. And that said, I thought given the transfer portal and given some of the guys that stuck around, that we didn't have to go through some major rebuilding cycle. We could work on being competitive right away. And I thought at times last year, we did that and set some foundational things in place. And I thought, especially down the stretch at the end of the year, we didn't quite do our job there as a group. Right now, listen, the program needs to be way up here. And I think everybody that's a Cincinnati fan or alumnus of this university or supporter of this program understands that the standard here is this high. And we're not there every day yet. But I don't think, we're asking people to wait years and years and years. I believe this team can take some major steps forward and be a great basketball team by the end of the year. But make no mistake about it, we realize there's some work to do, and we realize that the only way to do that is to come in every day and kind of embrace that process.
Last question, and I'm not asking you to give it away any secrets here, but based on what you've seen from your team so far this season, you guys are 6-3, so too is Xavier. You both have played very, very competitive schedules so far, by and large, this year. You come into this game and you look at a thing or two that could be the difference between winning and losing. It would be?
Gosh, I don't know if I can say one or two things. I can tell you that this will be a big-time college basketball game. They've had a couple signature wins already this year, and they came off even though the coaching change happened with Sean, they return a lot of guys that came off a great finish to last year and run through the NIT. So, we understand we got our hands full, but we're also excited about that challenge. To say one thing, I think with Sean's teams, you got to get back in transition. That's something that we haven't done well in a couple games this year that have cost us, specifically looking at the Arizona game. We got to get back and get our defense set. That's something that the backboards, I think are a huge factor in our games and their games when you're just looking statistically right now. So those are a couple things, but there's probably 35 more as we're continuing to dive into this scout.
Coach, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know there are a lot of other demands on your time, especially for this week, day in and day out. But thank you so much. Wish you all the best. And it's going to be a lot of fun with a packed house down there on the UC campus on Saturday. So best of luck. And, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Always appreciate you having me.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Wes Miller, kind enough to join. Really, I just can't say how much I appreciate those guys today, both Wes and Sean. Because as we said yesterday, look, my career's taken me in a lot of places, and I've been fortunate to meet a lot of people. This thing we're doing now, you're grateful for the startup and trying to get it going. There are a lot of other bigger names and bigger programs and bigger platforms these guys could be going on. But we really appreciate this week and really any time, any of these guys taking the time to come on the program. I almost fell out of my chair when he said a more intense rivalry than Carolina-Duke. He's right in that until you go down there and spend time down there. I was born in Chapel Hill. My mom and dad were students there, got married there. My sister and I were born there, whole deal. We used to go to basketball games here every year when we were growing up. It really is. It's two different worlds, Chapel Hill and Durham. Two different worlds. In fact, it's a different world between Durham and Duke University. That's for another time and another place. But these schools, a couple miles apart from each other.
I think there's a true hatred in the Xavier and Cincinnati rivalry that you don't get necessarily. You can say Louisville, Kentucky. You can say Duke, UNC, Wisconsin, Marquette. All these great rivalries around the sport. But the difference in Xavier and UC is you go to Kenwood Mall. You go downtown to eat dinner. You go over to you go to church with these people. Everybody – it's Xavier, it's UC. You're one or the other. And there is that born intense hatred that you have to run into every single day when you're around this city that this game means so much to. And the other thing, too, about this game, unlike North Carolina Duke, is it only gets played once a year. One time, you go out there, you play. North Carolina Duke, they could split the season series 1-1, and then everybody says, well, okay, now – North Carolina, people would argue that they will always have the upper hand in that rivalry because of what happened in the Final Four and the way that they beat Coach K at Cameron Indoor last year to end the season in the last regular season game. Then they go and beat Coach K in the Final Four. I think North Carolina fans will always have an argument there to hold over Duke fans' heads. But as it relates to this city and this game, I know that Xavier has had more control of this rivalry in the last 20-ish years, but Cincinnati leads the all-time rivalry by, I think, 15 games, something in that range. So when you look at this city and you talk about the vitriol of this rivalry, I would believe that. I think it's a different level here in Cincinnati that nobody else really understands outside of the city, and I think Cincinnati people are okay with that.
How close are the two schools?
3 miles.
That explains it all.
Yeah.
3 miles.
Yeah.
Mark Titus wrote a great article, who did Club Trillion. Mark Titus wrote a great article back when he was with Grantland about, I don't know, probably 8 years ago at this point about the rivalry. And as somebody that obviously myself is very familiar with it, has covered it for years, has been to many shootouts myself, and I'm only 26 and have known the history forever. I mean, this is probably dating anybody, but I remember being in Northern Virginia watching the brawl back in the early 2010s, and I'm sitting there studying for my freshman year of high school chemistry exam, and there goes Yancey Gates and Kenny Freese and everybody else. And I mean, there's just such a hatred because these fan bases have to directly interact 365 days a year that, like you said, you don't get in Durham and Chapel Hill or Lexington and Louisville as much.
Plus, these kids, the kids on the team have to stick around all summer, and they play against each other in the summer. There's a lot of smack talking going on there. I mean, I can't even imagine. Wes Miller's got a big-time recruiting class coming in there next year, highlighted by Rayvon Griffith.
Yeah, he's good. I've called several of Rayvon's games in high school. I've watched him play for a few years. He's good. Jizzle James, Edrin James, his son is in part of that recruiting class. So, yeah, and I mean, Xavier the same way. Trey Green, they got 4 guys. Trey Green is another 4-star guy that everybody's real high on. So there's a future to this program and to this rivalry that I think is there. And I do think you made a good point about the coaches, because at least from like Xavier's perspective, they always thought that Huggins or Mick Cronin was always so hateable. But Wes Miller's not a hateable guy.
Yeah, but I mean, but say what you will about it, and I think that rivalry at times has gotten way out of control. I've been to the game for 30 years, and I think oftentimes it's out of control. Having said that, it was a hell of a lot more fun when Huggs was around, because he didn't like Gillen. You heard him on the program last week. He loves Skip Prosser. Loves Skip and misses him every single day. They talked about getting together in the offseason after Skip went on to Wake, and having a beer together and all that kind of thing. That was not the deal when Gillen was there. And I mean to tell you, some of the games at Cincinnati Garden when Xavier was playing its home games there, and Huggs at the Shoe, big league days. Casey?
So I also want to add a factor, and you guys might not agree with me on this, but Cincinnati fans, we're passionate. We're passionate about our teams, our football team, the Reds, our basketball teams. And when you put 2 basketball teams together that both the city is just passionate about, of course this is going to be one of the most heated rivalries of all college basketball. I mean, it's just the people. We, the people in Cincinnati, are passionate, and we like to go at it. We believe that our team is better, and we are going to go there and support our team every year.
It's going to be a big league game. Saturday, 3P. Stinks it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, that's what happens when big-time TV gets involved. There was a day for many, many years, all those years I was just talking about a minute ago, Huggs, Gillen, Huggs, Prosser, where that was a local game. It was played during the middle of the week. Channel 19 had the rights to the UC games. It wasn't like somebody else had the rights to the Xavier game, so no matter where the game was played, it was going to be on Channel 19, and we were doing the game. I was doing a play-by-play back in the day with Derek Dickey and later Anthony Buford and that kind of thing. And it was a big-time deal. You had an hour and a half, 2-hour pregame show. It was fantastic. We're hoping to line up by the end of the week. Maybe another former UC star, Xavier star who's played in this game, talk about the rivalry. And we're going to take a quick break. Sean Miller's coming up in about 5 minutes. Kind enough to join us. All kinds of folks on the chat today. Big numbers today. Everett, Tomas, obviously Sir Boy Wonder, who we never hear from anymore. Alex is here. Reed, Don always chiming in with good stuff. The player formerly known as Mouse Cop, Excalibur Iron Force. That's a great name.
That's the best name.
No doubt. AJ, the Real Spirit Cat, Phil. They're hundreds right now on the chat. And it's a big-time game coming up Saturday. Sean Miller from the X-Men. Coming up after this.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
Also, when I lost in Anaheim, my dad was at the game, and my dad was down and out and sad. And see, back then the older generation, a lot of times they would use negative motivation as like you can't do this or hey man, you won't do that. Where nowadays you can't use negative motivation, to the young kids, because a lot of them would just sit out on you and quit. What I mean? So my dad. Never forget, and I've told people this, he told me, he said, son, I don't know if you'll ever win one, a pennant or not. We didn't win it that year in San Francisco because, we had them down, you know what I mean? And he says, I don't know if you'll ever win one, after this. And that's the first thing that I thought about was say, hey, Dad, you're wrong again. I mean, I swear that's the first thing I thought about. Dad, you're wrong.
Everybody wants to say, Dad, you're wrong, right? There's 2 beds in that room. There's 2 double beds.
Boy, you're
in that room. Jim wants to know, said it kind of reminds me of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson on Dennis the Menace. There are a lot of people wondering, what's going on down there. Because you've been very hard on Danae on this program. I mean, you have worn her out when it comes to her choice of accommodations on places where you guys have been staying, whether it was down in Mexico. Right. I think you referred to that 6-star resort as a dump. And then you went on to say that the house you rented down on the Gulf side of Florida here the last couple of weeks was also a dump. Anything you want to share, or would you just rather stay away from that topic?
No, we're catching a situation. There's no doubt about it. But, Casey, this is what you have to look forward to when you're married for 13 years. You see that? No action, pulling no wool, and then going back, pulling no wool. So 13 years of marriage, that's what it gets you. 2 separate queen beds. And you know who Tucker slept with last night? Danae. I'm all by myself, and don't think I'm not going to go to that Taylor Swift concert and get me some phone numbers so I can get a Mrs. Jones number 3, because I will. I ain't messing around.
Like I did TJ Watt last night. I hope TJ Watt likes eating grass because I fed him like a mule when Lyle Collins was laying on his back. We like pancakes, and I put syrup on that boy. I fed that man. Put syrup on him. That's what we doing. We pancaking the league this year, baby. Let's go.
That's Zim Uday. I mean, does it get any better than that guy? Look at him. That's a real fan. It's a real man. I love that guy.
Also, when I lost in.
All right, welcome back to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I can't stop laughing every time I hear that Tracy Jones bit about the Red Roof Inn and giving Casey something to look forward to. As Casey is getting married, as some of you know, in June, and what he has to look forward to. As many of you out there watching right now. Hey, he chimed in after I ripped off a few of the folks that are with us today. U.S. veteran, retired. Now that's a leader of men. He says, I got to check the show tomorrow. Busy today. God bless you and God bless America. Love that guy. That's a real man.
What a fan.
That's a real man. All those who have served, are serving, and those who will serve for the United States of America, we always salute each and every one of you. And we thank you. We thank Wes Miller for joining the program. And
we're getting
what
Sean.
he's trying to get going on at UC. And we're waiting on Sean Miller coming up here in a matter of moments. He'll be checking in shortly. And looking forward to catching up with him about the shootout this week. You look at this game and this rivalry. Do we know who's coming in to broadcast that game? Do you know who's announcing that game on Saturday by chance?
It's on ESPN2, so I don't know who's going to be calling that game.
Okay.
We could probably find out pretty quick.
You're not announcing that game?
I wish.
My favorite memory call was without a doubt the night they opened the Shoemaker Center. And Hugs was there. They had 4 scholarship players. They brought Steve Sanders from the football team to play. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he hit a half-court shot at the buzzer to win the game against, I think, Minnesota. That's going way back. Way back. Salute returned, says U.S. veteran retired. So, Paul.
Yes.
Your scouting report of the Musketeers for this one, and I know we have, a couple of more days here to really get into it. But before we have Sean Miller on, and you're always kind enough to offer any help that I might need, and Lord knows I need a lot of help, but I'd gotten some things prepared for last night. You heard Wes Miller say that, rebounding will be a big part, and getting back in transition against Sean Miller teams. That's what they do. They get up and down the floor.
Yeah, Xavier plays pretty quick. They are one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country this year, Xavier is. UC's been able to hit some shots from the outside, but they've also been cold at some points this year, too. You look at that game against Ohio State for UC. They've had some trouble scoring, but you look at what they did against Arizona, you look at what they did against Bryant. They've been able to put up a lot of points pretty quick. For Xavier, they're going to probably focus down around the basket. You have a pretty decent advantage both in size and just in talent down around the basket, where you look at guys like Jack Nungy and Zach Fremantle as opposed to Victor Locken, who's had a good season, but there's just not a lot of depth behind Victor Locken there in the post. Oguama hasn't given you a ton. So for Xavier, I think they're going to try to rely on some of that down there. And then, two, Xavier's had some better depth in the last game or two. You look at Desmond Claude, freshman point guard who's been able to handle the ball, look better under pressure. Sule Boom, the transfer from UTEP, has looked unbelievable in the first month of the season. So I think for Xavier, if they can just continue to shoot the ball well and work that ball down inside around the basket and really control the game in the front court, it could be a long day for Cincinnati, but you never know. I'm going to give Xavier a call here and see if
Sean. One thing I want to just point out, Don on the chat wrote, I love Dusty Baker, but you know what always rubbed me the wrong way is when he let Brian Price go off on Trent Rosecrans. Dusty was not there when Brian did that. I was in the room when that happened. That was in Milwaukee. Brian Price was the manager. Dusty had been gone by then, so he had nothing to do with that. That was all on Brian. And Brian Price, good man. But he melted down that day on C. Trent Rosecrans. I think all of us who were sitting there and had sat through many of the managers' meetings before the game, like 3 hours before the game, where every manager in baseball gets together with the press that covers the team, and a team like the Reds in a market like Cincinnati where you only have one paper, and you've got C. Trent at the Athletic now and that kind of thing, but you only really have three guys, along with, say, Jim Day, who does a pregame show, that are in that room with the manager of the Reds. Same thing with the Pirates, or the same thing with the Royals, some of the smaller market teams. Aaron Boone's having to sit down in New York with 25 people sitting in that room. But Brian, that day, he just had a bad day, and I'm assuming he had a bad day, and went off the reservation. And obviously that whole thing went viral. But Dusty Baker had nothing to do with that. I see what you're saying. You're talking about Brandon Phillips going off BP. I thought you meant Brian Price. Well, you're right about that one. You're 100% right about that one, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. So, Don, forgive me. You were talking about Brandon Phillips going off on C. Trent Rosecrans, and I agree with you 1,000%. That should have never happened. Should have never happened. Any luck?
No, he just got back to me and said that they were trying to get him in. So hopefully he's getting in. He knows. We just talked to him. So hopefully.
Breaking college football news is what besides Sonny Dykes extended at TCU to 2028 through 2028?
Who do you think got the Louisville job?
Oh, yeah.
Louisville job.
This happened.
Who do you think? You gotta guess this one, right?
Louisville job?
Yeah.
Was it somebody we talked about their name for the UC job? No.
Connection to Louisville. Coaches in the Big Ten.
Coaches in the guy left Purdue. Brom. Wow. Brom leaving Purdue. Now, see, in my opinion, okay, Brom just took Purdue to the Big Ten championship game. And if they won it, they still weren't going to be in a college football playoff because they had lost 3 or 4 times going into that game. But, man, with the college football playoff expanding, all the talk about conferences and the 2 super conferences, and, if you will, with UCLA and SC coming into the Big Ten, we know all about the SEC. They still don't know when Texas and Oklahoma are coming into that conference. They don't know yet when that's going to happen. So next year, when UC goes in the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma are still going to be in the Big 12 for football in 2023, the fall of 23. That is going to happen. But if you're Brom, okay, look, Louisville, it might be in complete disarray, a complete mess right now from an athletic standpoint. The basketball team is beyond awful. The football program has been average at best, and that's not all on Satterfield. But it is a big money, big time university, and the way it spends money on sports. And so if you're Brom, you're playing in the ACC. And let's be honest about it. You'll have a team every now and again. Good year here, good year there. There's Clemson and there's everybody else. Right? And I'm not so sure Clemson doesn't end up leaving that conference sooner or later. But if they stay in it, and kind of, them staying in it would sort of hold the whole thing together. North Carolina's had some good run here with Mac Brown. Wake Forest has had a couple of nice years, really nice years. NC State. But at Louisville, if you do it right, Okay? They ought to – and by the way, Florida State's on the come. And that's a sleeping giant in the conference because there was a time where they were the top dog in the United States year in and year out under Bobby Bowden. But Brom leaving Purdue does not surprise me in the least bit because if you can finish in the top 2 in the ACC, you've got a shot for the college football playoff. You got a shot. Purdue has no shot. Outside of total lightning in a bottle, Purdue has zero chance on a yearly basis of competing with Ohio State, of competing with Michigan, of competing with Penn State. And some of you out there, Purdue fans, might be throwing something at your computer screen right now saying, well, we beat them 2 years ago. Okay, well, that's fine. But those three, what Fickell's going to do at Wisconsin, what Lincoln Riley's got going on at SC, what Chip Kelly is starting to build finally at UCLA, and that's not even counting the Michigan States, the Marylands, teams like this. So, his shot at getting to a college football playoff is a lot better at Louisville than it is at Purdue.
I think we may have something here.
Okay, well, just let me know.
So we you want to go to a quick break or
you want to go to a break?
Yeah, let's go to a quick break.
All right, we'll go to a quick break, and hopefully we'll have Sean Miller on the other side. Back after this.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
All right, we're back on Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Working through some technical stuff here with Xavier men's head basketball coach Sean Miller. If and when we get him on, we will certainly get him on. We've got about 15 minutes left in the program, so we will do our best to work through this. We're talking about that whole Louisville basketball thing. I mean, good Lord. Have they won a game yet?
No, and they're playing 1-9 Florida State this Saturday. So
Florida State's 1-.
They're terrible, unstoppable force
under Leonard Hamilton.
They're terrible, absolutely terrible. Both teams. The ACC is just, at the bottom there. And you look at Georgia Tech too. Not good. Both.
But didn't Georgia Tech beat Georgia last night? Didn't I see that?
Here, wait, hold on just a second.
I thought they did. Again, Paul is very hard at work. He was a guy that was busting it to try and get Sean Miller on here today.
I'll look that up for you. The Georgia Tech beat Georgia?
I thought they did last night. Rumors in baseball. We were talking about some of the moves made earlier. Wilson Contreras, good player, might be going to the St. Louis Cardinals. So, as Don points out, if he goes there, they've got one of the top catchers in the game. Yadier Molina stepping away from the game. They got the MVP first baseman in Goldschmidt. And you've got Arenado down there at third, who finished, second or third in the MVP voting behind his own teammate. We've talked before that the Cardinals, despite being in a similar size city, are the quote-unquote outlier in Major League Baseball, meaning, they sell out every game virtually. Like the sun rising in the east, you can book on 3 million fans a year coming through the turnstiles at Busch Stadium. It's a guarantee every single year. And a lot of people say it's always been like that. That's not true. Not true. That started just before that whole Pujols thing, because I was doing the Cubs games back in the early 90s. Cardinals had some good teams, but they were starting to fade. The Vince Colemans, the Willie McGee's, all that kind of thing. Now, for Cubs games, obviously, a lot of Chicago people would come down, or people across the border right there into Illinois who were Cub fans. So you'd have huge crowds for those games. Same is true at Wrigley. A lot of people don't realize. 6 years I was there, they were barely drawing over 2 million fans a game. I mean, a lot of days where you'd have, like we see with the Reds, 8,000, 14,000, 17,000, the whole deal. And then all of a sudden, they start fixing up the ballpark. Obviously, the advent of putting lights at Wrigley Field, that started on August the 8th of 1988. And now all of a sudden, you open yourself up to a group of people that can come to your games that were never able to come to your games before by playing in night games. Ricky Vaughn, no longer pitching for the Tribe. Thinks the only team Louisville can beat in college basketball this year is Portland Bible. I don't know. Portland Bible has the Lord on its side. I'm not so sure about that.
Did you see Trace's comment? That was an ESPN game, right? That wasn't.
You see Trace's comment about
I don't remember the game. I mean, I get asked stuff like this all the time.
You didn't call that, I don't think.
Yeah, I did. I'm pretty sure I did. I could be wrong. 96, 97. I'm quite positive I was doing that game. We were doing those games, or maybe that's the year it all came to an end. I don't remember. We did a lot of them. And then ESPN wound up getting the national rights, getting the rights to that game. I did that game?
Yes. I was thinking of the 99, 2000. You did that game at the shoe.
Yeah. I just don't remember. I just remember the players. There were just so many great players in those games. Guys who just came up big in big moments. I remember Terry Nelson, and that's a guy maybe we'll get on the show this week. I remember him coming out, and this just still to this day sticks in the craw of Xavier fans, where Nelson just came out before the game and said, we're going to kill these guys. We're going to beat them by 20. I thought Huggs was going to kill Terry Nelson for saying that. But Terry said it. He was a brash guy that walked in the door from a junior college in California, just like Corey Blunt did that year and Eric Martin that year. All those guys knew each other. Huggs talked about this on the program last week. You know what? Let's just tell Sean, forget it. We're down in the last 9 minutes of the show, and whatever technical difficulties we have, he didn't want to sit around and have to deal with all that. So just tell him thanks.
Okay.
But no thanks.
All right.
Sorry to all of you. Thought we had this thing locked up. Thanks to Paul for trying to get it done. Thanks for Tom Iser for trying to get it done. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. So let's shift gears back to football for a minute. 2019 is the last time the Cincinnati Bengals beat the Cleveland Browns. Can you believe that's only 3 years ago? I mean, it feels like 1,000 years ago if you're a Bengals fan.
Is that?
But I mean, to think that, at that time, I think we all agree that Andy Dalton was starting to be on probably near the end of his Bengals career. Team went 2-14 that year. Zach Taylor had come on board. Things were going like this, right? Baker Mayfield, on the other hand, now the Browns did not have a good year that year. The next year they went to the playoffs. But Baker was just getting started. And here we are 3 years later, 2 years removed from Baker Mayfield leading the Browns to the playoffs, actually winning a playoff game, did he not? They did win a playoff game, the Browns.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now Mayfield just got on a plane yesterday after basically getting let go by the Carolina Panthers. He might be starting tomorrow night for the LA Rams. Well, you just think about all of the whatever they say about degree of separation, right? I mean, Baker gone after leading that franchise. It hadn't won a playoff game forever and a day. Long gone. And now he's going to the team that just beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl that can't get it out of their own way. They've lost 6 games in a row.
Have the Browns lost 6 games?
No. I'm saying the LA Rams.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
team
Yeah.
he's going to now has lost 6 in a row.
Yep. That's
it's hard to believe.
I don't know why they would want the headache, in all honesty. Because I
Headache
feel like
of who?
The LA Rams. Why would they want Baker Mayfield, who's just kind of like a drama? That's what he brings, is a lot of drama and a lot of publicity, and your team is doing bad. You really want another quarterback in your locker room, you just want a player in your locker room that's going to cause a lot of disruption.
Explain to me why you think Baker Mayfield, the only thing that I can think of that I would consider to be drama for Baker Mayfield is when he stabbed that Oklahoma flag in the middle of Ohio Stadium after beating the Buckeyes while he was with the Sooners. Now, I had an issue with him, and who am I? I'm not judging the guy. I just thought that, based on what he had done at the time, for him to show up in all these commercials all the time on television, right?
Right.
And Progressive Insurance is based out of Cleveland, Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. And so they were the ones that started putting him all these national spots. But what drama does he cause?
I think it's more just his personality that he brings in the locker room. Like, the Browns didn't like it. He thought he was immature. They shipped him out. He doesn't even last a full season with his new team. They cut bait with him. I mean, the dude just – one, I don't think he's a very good quarterback, personally. I don't think so. But secondly, I think the personality of Baker Mayfield will rub people off the wrong way. I get the dude has this persona of being he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he's not afraid to go to war with anyone. He's going to talk his talk, but he rarely ever backs it up.
Well,
and that to me is where the drama starts, because the Rams do have players that like to talk, like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. Those two guys, they like to talk, and they back it up.
Yes, they do.
So,
we have the great John Fanta, who's actually watching the program today. How about that? John, welcome. Good to have you. I mean, he knows all about what's going on up there. He says it's the Progressive commercials, the quotes about the coaches, several moments where he's talked about me instead of the team. Sir Boy Wonder, among others, talk about the crotch grabbing, I guess, that he did, right?
Yeah.
Just an immature guy, some would say. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, look. I'd rather have, and Browns fans might lose their mind. If I've got to go pick up some guy off the scrap heap, and that's where he is right now, leaving Carolina to go to the LA Rams. If I've got to have a guy, my team is reeling, I've lost 6 in a row, We're the defending Super Bowl champs. We've had 2 quarterbacks go down. I got to find some guy. I'd rather have some guy who's got some passion and fire and a chip on his shoulder and some life about him than bringing in some stiff who is, and you can call Mayfield a stiff if you want, but rather than just some guy who's just vanilla, milquetoast, I mean, maybe he brings a little fire to that locker room that needs some fire. I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe, but I just don't see it, Tom. And to me, I feel like it's not something that, like, what does he do? Does he give them more wins? I really don't think so.
I don't know if he does or not. I know their team is in shambles. It all starts with the offensive line. Whitworth retires. They lose other guys to injuries. It just goes to show you. You know, in this league, you got to have a great offensive line, and you better have a great quarterback. Stafford had a great year last year. I didn't think he was all that great in Detroit, and I did 1,000 of his games. He's a gamer. I mean, ultimate gamer. That guy played long and threw for a lot of yards, and all the stat freaks and all that out there love a guy like Stafford. But when he went to that team last year, now he's got a head coach, he's got a system, he's got a great defense, he's got great skill players around him, he stayed healthy, he played well. And now he's hurt. And so the Rams are just trying to get through the season. We have box lunch coming up today. Look who's back in the house. High and tight on the haircut, tan, looking good, Reed Mouse, alongside, of course, Trace Fowler. Welcome back, big boy.
It was great to be back. You know, well, it actually doesn't feel great outside.
It's not bad today now.
No, it's not.
It's in the 50s. Not bad.
But it's not 75 and sunny with zero clouds in the sky. I'll tell you what. I'm not tougher than the sun. I got burnt a lot this week, Tom. But
I appreciate sunscreen.
Well,
I mean, that's something that they sell at stores, Tom.
They do?
Yeah, sunscreen. You put it on.
Carcinogenic.
And what it does is it stops you from getting
carcinogenic.
burned.
I think you're right.
Well, it's a catch-22.
Right. The stuff doesn't look right. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't feel right. There's something not right about it.
It's a catch-22.
Dr. Lucky is screaming at the screen if he wasn't watching Patience right now.
I'll tell you this. We have. I'm going to have to start when Reed comes back, if you've noticed. I'm going to have to start putting a salary cap, if you will, or a cap on how many baseball topics that we're allowed to talk about on this show. Because Reed Mouse, big baseball guy.
Love it.
I like baseball as much as anybody, but I'm going to tell you something right now. The whole winter meeting thing, the whole off-season thing,
well,
zero interest for me. And yes, it has something to do with
you're from Cincinnati. That's why.
But even like, and we'll get into this in the show, Tom, you hit the nail right on its head. At the end of the day, there's only a handful of teams that are going to win at the end of the year.
There's no doubt.
So it becomes then, like, where do you set your priorities? Or where do you set your expectations? And when do you find yourself being, like, excited or happy? And I don't know, like, in Cincinnati, have we gotten to the point now where maybe we've have to lower the standards of saying no longer are we worried about any kind of pennants. It's just a matter of being in the hunt for the playoffs. And that is the goal. Are we there yet?
That's the shame of the sport. And that's why I think a lot of people who love the game are getting so discouraged about the game. Because if there's ever an illustration, all you need to do is what you just said. Look at the last 2 days of the baseball winter meetings, and that's all you need to know. The only teams we're talking about spending money outside of Josh Bell getting 2 years from the Cleveland Guardians, outside of that one move, everybody else, Yankees, Giants, Phillies, Mets, Cubs,
Texas.
I mean,
yeah.
Think of all the teams we haven't even mentioned their name, and we won't mention their name unless they're signing some guy to a minor league contract with an invite to spring training.
Has the MLB had more different franchises, a greater number of franchises, win the World Series in the past 10 years than the other two sports? Because I think they have.
That argument.
Well, number of franchises is irrelevant. It's more to do, it's not so much to do with team versus team. It's now become strictly market versus market. And that's the one issue the NFL has never had and will ever have. Green Bay has as much of a chance to win the Super Bowl as New York or L.A. Kansas City, Pittsburgh, the Reds, go on and on and on and on and on. Their chances of winning the World Series are this and this compared to the Yankees, the Astros, the Giants, the Dodgers, the Mets. And it's not saying all those other teams are great every year. I mean, the history of the Mets franchise, even being in New York, is not a great track record. But now when it comes down to money, and that's what it's all come down to. It's come down to money. And no chance. None. N-U-N, none. The way the game is structured right now, and you look over the last 20 years, to your point, the only quote-unquote outlier, and I know all the analytics freaks, they go crazy. I used to get texted this stuff all the time in the middle of the game on Chris Welsh's chat board. Well, look at the Rays. Look at the A's. Yeah, well, what about them?
Haven't won
the whole thing.
Yep.
But they were there to be
only
fair.
Outliers the Kansas City Royals. That's it.
Are the White Sox, I know they're in Chicago, but are they a big money team? The White Sox, they won in 2005.
They traditionally don't spend a lot of money, but back when they won the whole thing, and you look at the players that were on that team, a lot of those guys, when they beat the Astros in that World Series, a lot of those guys were homegrown guys, and I mean really good players. But they were still spending some cash. But even then, how much has changed between then and now? And the answer to your question is still Chicago.
Right.
Still
You're right.
Chicago.
No, you're right. You're right.
And it's sad. It's really, really sad.
Is it impossible to fix? I mean,
I think
honestly,
a salary cap really does fix a lot of things.
But the salary cap fixes it. But my point is that even possible against the, as you've said time and time again, and I know you've hinted at it, the strongest union the world has ever seen.
Yep.
Is that ever going to be even feasible? At what point does the bubble have to burst so bad that things have to get so bad that the players' union and the owners can't sit in a meeting room and say, listen, for the betterment of us all, we have to fix something, and it's more or less around competitive nature of our game?
Well, here's the thing that has to happen. Two things have to happen for them. One is they all have to be honest and truthful with each other, which they've never been. And that begins with the baseball owners laying out their books in front of the players.
This is how much money we make.
This is exactly our spreadsheet on everything, right?
Correct.
This is how much we make. This is how much we spend. Here's how much we're gross at the end of the year after everything we have to pay for and everything we're bringing in. Because the argument that the players always make, and they're 1,000% correct on this, I'm not taking a side one way or the other, I don't care, is they'll say, well, you bought the franchise for $250 million and you sold it for $1 billion. That's a fact. But what happened year by year in between over the 25 years you owned the team? Did you make money? Did you lose money? Did you break even? And so until they open the books to the players are never going to agree that the sport is in trouble because they think the owners are making a lot of money. And whether they are or they aren't, I don't know. I've never been privy to that, to those kinds of that information.
Right.
But that's the only way you even get the players to listen after you say the two words salary cap.
Right.
They'll never listen again.
And the luxury tax was supposed to try to limit
It
big
curbs
market
spending
teams.
a little bit.
Yeah, it's supposed to try to stop specific markets, quite frankly, to spend as much money as they have been. But the truth is like, that's what I was trying to get at the other day with being wealthy. At some point, like, wealth is wealth. What's an extra couple, $20 million of some of these guys when they realize that their main focus is winning? And that's, again, I try to keep the whole Reds Cincinnati thing optimistic, and I want to be optimistic about it. But in a nutshell, when you're in a small market, it makes it very difficult to want to try to compete to win, because when you look at what you have to do to try to compete to win, it's very humbling. It makes you it's almost like you think you're really wealthy. Let's just give me a wealthy guy's name in Cincinnati. now? Like Linder, is that a fair?
Yeah, I'd say
okay.
yeah.
So the Linder family, you put them in a room in Cincinnati, and it's like, yeah, they're very wealthy. If they go sit in a room with Bezos and Elon Musk and Warren, all of a sudden it's like I can't compete with these guys. They have incredibly amount more wealth. And that's essentially what we have in regards to these small market teams is, yeah, you might think that their ownership group is really wealthy. You might think that they might be like very stingy. But the truth is they're not playing by the same rules as these major market teams. And no one can argue that. I'm not trying to give the Castellinis a pass on anything. Trust me. And I'm not trying to be like a homer and this naive guy that walks down to the stadium and wants to go to the Reds games and wants to feel like you're a part of a franchise that cares. Certainly the comments hurt a lot of people last year. We all know that. That's not foregone. But I also do think, genuinely speaking, in order to be successful in life in general, to be as successful as the Castellinis, there is a competitive spirit that runs there. There's a competitive spirit in every single person that's successful in life. But at some point, you start to prioritize how much you're willing to sacrifice to ultimately be competitive. And the reality is in Major League Baseball, for these small market teams, it's like asking a middle-class family, quite frankly, to take these lavish vacations to try to make their other family members happen when they don't really truly have that money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is I don't think that and I have no idea. I could be completely wrong on this. I can't imagine that there is a hell of a lot of difference between the wealth of the DeWitt family and the wealth of the Castellini family. They're both Cincinnati families. Bill DeWitt, who owns the Cardinals, he still lives here in Cincinnati. But the difference is, in their case, and that's why we say the Cardinals are really, truly the only outlier in all of baseball. Yeah. Because they're the one franchise that's not in the top 25 market in the country that they're bringing in 3.5 million fans every single year. So when Mr. DeWitt sits down and he looks at his balance sheet and he's going, okay, 3.5 million people walked in the door. Okay, well, that means we can spend X, right? Bob Castellini looks at the spreadsheet and says, we just drew 1.2 million. Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm not making excuses for Bob Castellini because I will never make any excuses for Bob Castellini. It's not my job. But it's a big difference, and it's more than just the Castellinis and more than just a handful of teams. It's becoming nearly the majority of teams. And when that happens, your sport is in big, big trouble. Just my opinion. Boys, crosstown shootout.
Yeah. Yeah, we were hoping to hear from both. What happened with Sean today, Paul?
Yeah, I sounds like we were having some technology issues. I was on the phone for about 20 minutes there trying to figure it out, and by the time we were getting there, it was too late. So
it's not looking good for the Muskies. I mean, if West shows up for the interview and Sean can't make it work, that's a bad omen.
He was there. We just couldn't get him connected. So
okay, we move on. Life goes on.
That's right.
That's right.
Technology sometimes is not the most enjoyable thing to deal with.
No, it's not.
And we've been there at this organization. That's
all right, boy. Paulie, thank you for working on that.
I tried.
Casey,
Sorry,
thank
Sean.
you. Brandon, thank you for lining up Wes Miller. Thank you very, very much. We thank Coach Miller, Wes Miller, and Sean for trying. So, gentlemen,
that's right.
Take it away.
Thanks. All right. What do you got to say about the crosstown shootout? Because I already know what my thoughts are on this. I think Xavier obviously is a much better basketball team than UC, but maybe my eyes aren't very good.
This is what I tried to tell you 2 weeks ago.
Because the truth is that Paul is a Ken Pom guy.
Ken Pom.
And when he sent out the text message last week that he said Ken Pom has this game at like a 1-point spread, I was floored.
Now you got to remember, Ken Pom doesn't take injuries into it. This will probably end up being closer to 4.5, 5 points for Xavier. But right now it's at 2. They don't know that Rob Finney's hurt. They don't know that John Newman's hurt. So they do factor that in. But yeah, it'll probably end up like where we were talking about. 9, 8, 9. No, my guess is on Friday when it opens, it'll be somewhere in the 4.5, 5 range. That would be my guess. Because last year, I had Mo Egger on the Rebound Rundown today, and he made a great point, which I didn't remember. Xavier was at home last year with a much better team.
What are you worried about?
And,
what number comes out? Are you worried if it's at 2 or 1 or 5?
I would say anything below 3. I would be worried if you get up toward because this, and that's what I was going to say. Xavier was at 6 last year at home with a significantly better team, and they won that by 20. So it's a rivalry game, and I think if it's around 6 or 7, that's probably the right number in a game like this at UC. I think 6 or 7 is probably the right number.
I thought Paul was going to say it. I thought he was getting ready to throw the record books right out the window.
I'm saving that for Saturday. I'm hoping I see Tony on Saturday.
You got to throw it out the window.
He told me last Saturday. Tony was at the Xavier West Virginia game. I ran into him, and I was like, "Yeah, are you going to be there next week?" I'm hoping.
Tony Pike, for those that don't know.
Yeah.
But
the reason I brought this topic in here was I was intrigued by what Wes said about, obviously Tom brought it up. You guys talked about it and off the bench to some extent, but I just want to throw my 2 cents in. And he said that this rivalry game has more passion. I don't know the exact adjective that he gave to describe it, but essentially lofting it above Duke UNC. And you brought up the point, like, they play one time. It means so much to these teams. But one point that I thought is, do you think that this game is elevated here in town? Because this, unfortunately, is the biggest game of the year for these two programs. Like Duke UNC, they've got bigger fish to fry towards the end of the year. They're playing for national championships. Xavier UC haven't been doing that. So this essentially is the big hoopla of the season.
I see where you're coming with that, but I think both programs have evolved to a point now where that's not necessary. Maybe they're not playing for a national champ. Like neither one of these teams are national championship caliber teams. But if you think back a few years ago to those teams with like Gary Clark and Trayvon Blewett when those shootouts were going on, those were some good teams that in 2018, if UC doesn't choke that away against against Nevada, they would have played Kansas State. That was a shoo-in UC Final Four in 2018 that didn't happen. And for Xavier, if JP McCurry doesn't get a phantom foul for his 5th foul, they might go to a Final Four that year. So there is I think an elevated level of expectations for both of these programs now, but I do see your point where I don't think this is both programs' Super Bowl, though. I really don't.
What?
You think there's bigger games for both these programs?
Oh, absolutely.
No.
What?
No. Not this year, Paul. I mean, I understand where you're going with that for a small extent. Like you're sitting here saying that they have evolved as programs.
I mean, a win over UConn means more to Xavier than a win over Cincinnati this year.
That's a wild take.
You think that? I mean, I know that means
that's
more
to us as a fan, but
that's what we're talking about.
The fans care, but if you want Xavier to make the tournament, then this is just not catching a bad loss against a top 75 team. UConn's number 4 team in the computer polls in the country. Like if you're just a national person looking at this game, like if you take the rivalry out of it.
But that's what we're saying is the rivalry means more here.
Oh, yeah, I guess. I don't know.
No, I mean, I'll put this in a full-scale perspective. I'm going to give Wes a little bit of credit by saying he has a bad memory than just saying he's lying. Because I think that's part of it. Okay,
he's selling a program a little bit. Right?
UC fans, they want to hear that, right? That's something as a if you're in this rivalry between Xavier and Cincinnati, the last thing you want to do is have a guy come on that's been a part of the UNC Duke rivalry before. Someone asks you a question about it, and you essentially. Even if you don't mean it negatively, even if you insinuate that rivalry is bigger than the one that you're currently in as the head coach of the University of Cincinnati Bearcats, is not a good look. So Wes knows what he's doing. He's not stupid. Yeah. But he's lying, or he has a really bad memory of his whole situation back there with UNC Duke. Those things aren't the same. Does it mean that this doesn't mean anything? Of course not. What I will say about this rivalry is this. I do think it has a little bit of more flavor to it this year than in years past for me, because I don't think for both of these programs, they're in a spot where they are looking at playing deep into a tournament or in years past, Xavier's been a 1 seed or a 2 seed or let's just say 5 seed or better, to where you're like, you know what, whatever. If we lose this game, so what? We got, like he said, we got bigger things to look forward to. I don't think that's the case for Cincinnati specifically. And I also would say Xavier's in a spot to where a good year, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is winning a single game in the NCAA tournament.
I'd say so.
So at the end of the day, you know, this is the game that everyone's going to point to for the rest of the year as a fan base, as a collection of people that live in this area. So that's why I think it holds maybe more value this year than it does in years past. I think UC, quite frankly, I've watched them. They're not very good. They're just not. They're a bad basketball team. They have no interior presence at all outside of Victor Lofgren, who's relatively decent offensively. I actually like Victor. I'm not trying to like say he's a bad player, but they have no one else.
Nobody.
And you're just assuming from a UC standpoint as a basketball fan, UC basketball, you're just hoping and praying that a guy like Jeremiah Davenport, right, who's quite frankly as reliable as crypto, like, you know, it's one way he's the best player in the game, and the next game you're wondering like why he's even playing Division I basketball, and that's being quite frank with how I see it. Outside of that, you got Landers Nolly who can get hot from outside. UC is there's nothing else there. Xavier to me is a little more. They just got a little more polish to them, to my. But that doesn't mean they'll win one specific game, one single game. You put what is it, 40 minutes on a clock?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who the best team is, more likely than not in a rivalry game, if there's not one team that's significantly better. So that's how I look at this.
And the other thing too is that there's not a single player in this game that has played in front of a full crowd at Fifth Third, and there isn't a coach like Sean Miller was there back before it was renovated, you know, way back in the old days, and he won his last shootout at Fifth Third. But there is not a single player on either roster that was there to play in a game in 2018. So you're going to get that part of it too, where it's maybe a new type of environment. But this game is way more important for UC's resume to win than it is for Xavier's more not to lose. And this is also like, I've seen some people talking about Xavier winning this game, and like UC's a top 75 team. They're not great, but they're not terrible. Like they'll probably end up being a quad 2, potentially I don't want to say quad 1 game, but like they'll kind of.
What's UC's best win this year?
Best win?
Best win. WIN. Give me that one.
I mean,
Paul. Let's stop sitting here bringing up. I mean,
ranking wise, you just want it objective? It's Bryant on Sunday.
Okay, there we go.
And they're 181.
I'll say
that's my point.
Yeah.
Like,
well, going back to what we were talking about, the spread things, about at what point, because we put a lot of weight on spreads on this show.
Yeah.
And remember the spreads that UC had earlier on in the year, where they were 3-point dogs against Ohio State and they lose by 40. They were 6-point dogs, 7-point dogs against Arizona, and they needed 12 points in the final 50 seconds.
Is Vegas like the Jags of the NFL last year, where Vegas they just keep giving this team respect, and every week you bet on the Jags. It's like the Jags are gonna hit, and then lo and behold, the Jags come out week 17 of the NFL season, baby, and they just put it on the Colts. And if you lose money on them for 6 straight weeks, you finally feel vindicated. You're like, yes, we got one.
I'll say so.
Is that going to be UC this year?
Might be.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say this real quick. Seth Pryor is talking about Kentucky-Louisville rivalry on a big scale. If Kentucky loses to Louisville this year, like Coach Calipari is fired before he leaves the building.
Yeah,
right?
do you think he's fired on the spot?
Yes. Like he's like fired on the floor, like what's his name was
Herm Edwards?
Yeah, Herm Edwards was this year. Like fired on the floor.
Right.
Like
I mean, that genuinely, everyone think that's an overreaction. We're trying to be funny on the show. That's the 100% truth.
And I'd want them to like make a scene out of it. Like if he's got a clipboard up there, like snap it in half and like toss it on the floor. Like get out of here. Like I want them to make a big scene out of it.
Louisville started the season ranked 91st. They're now 211th.
Tough.
211.
Yeah, they're bad. Really bad. Like you can't be any worse as Louisville.
They're probably going to be 6-point underdogs to Florida State, who's 1-9 and has a win over Mercer.
They play tonight?
No, Saturday.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
You know, Tom talks about how he's coached his he coached his daughter's basketball growing up.
Could they beat Louisville? They're city champs.
I genuinely think that you could give Tom and let him go out and get whatever assistance he wants, and they can't have a worse year than what Louisville's about to have. Like, genuinely, it doesn't matter who the coach is. Like, they're that bad. All right, let's move on.
Yeah,
Heisman.
let's go. Heisman.
So, I really quickly with the Heisman is this. I think that the award has been it's been just like similar maybe to Major League Baseball. The last 5 to 10 years of this award have gotten watered down. We've made it to where it's nothing but a statistical analysis. It comes down to who has the most touchdowns, the most passing yards, and do you play on a relatively decent team? And it's a quarterback award. I know you're going to be like, oh, well, Devontae Smith won. Okay, sure. That's like an oasis out in the middle of a desert. You want to point to it?
There's definitely an anomaly.
It's an anomaly.
When was the last running back to win?
I just don't like the award anymore. It's not even like enjoyable to even think about who's the Heisman, because you genuinely have not had the best players in the country on the Heisman ballot for years now.
You made a point
Mark Ingram, by the way.
Mark Ingram?
Yeah.
So that was a decade ago.
Yep.
You brought up the point, I think, on the show, maybe Monday, that the award should go to the player who helps his team the most. Maybe you put that in the chat.
I said that if you read the actual Heisman committee's statement on what it means to win the Heisman, a part of that award was someone that I think the terms were, and I'm paraphrasing, hardworking, perseverance, and has basically like good sportsmanship to them.
Oh, so it's the coach's award that they give to the worst player on the team.
I'm saying, and it exemplifies obviously an outstanding performance, or whatever the last phrase is that they use. We all know it's trying to be the most MVP. Right. I just don't know how you can give Caleb Williams this award as a committee when those are on the actual statements of what you're trying to say. I'm not trying to be an old man here. Yeah, I'm not trying to be like the old man here who doesn't think that you should be able to like express yourself, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe it's being a parent. Maybe it's I don't know, old man yells at cloud attitude about this. I just don't see how that's acceptable to put that on your fingernails. I don't see how that's even a remote possibility of wanting to elevate someone who does something like that. I think he arguably, yes, is the best player in the country. But I'd also say he gets knocked for not only that, but he also jumps in the portal after 1 year, tries to get as much NIL money as he possibly can, and he goes on. And we're going to give that award over a guy like Max Duggan. I'm not even here to try to champion Stetson Bennett. Like, I'm not, because then I'd be like, oh, you're a homer. You're just saying that because he's a Georgia guy. But at the end of the day, who's done more? You went out into a Pac-12 conference. You lost 2 games, right? You arguably could have lost the third. On the biggest stage, give him credit. He did get hurt, and he stayed out there.
When he got hurt, talk about a team helping your team. I mean,
right.
When he went hurt, it got bad.
I was also wrong. It was Derrick Henry. I knew it was a running back from Alabama. But,
go on. Yes.
Yeah.
I just don't know how as a committee they're going to give this, and they're going to give it to Caleb Williams. And the whole idea of random ass people are basically like Heisman voters at this point. To me, it's like,
who does vote on the Heisman? Beat writers?
Writers, and
Dan Horde was offered a vote, but he turned it down.
Right. And you have guys like, I mean, no offense, but like I watch college football as much as anybody. You got guys like Josh Pate, who I would argue is one of the most knowledgeable people in college football, doesn't even get a vote. It's wild. John Heyman might have a vote.
Hey, I like John Heyman. But I'll say this in defense of Caleb Williams. I haven't watched a whole lot of Caleb Williams this year, but no one has wowed me like Caleb Williams has. And I don't watch as much. I probably watch 1/5 of college football that you watch. And I can tell you that no one has wowed me this year like Caleb Williams has wowed me. If I could take any college football player right now, I'm taking Caleb Williams.
I'm not going to argue that. And that's where maybe the argument's lost. It's just like I would like to see someone that I feel like is deserving of the award, that would honor the award. Yeah, let's put some prestigious nature back on the award of how you behave and how you carry yourself. Because that, again, has to be Max Duggan. And if it's not, then I'm done on the award. I literally could care less about that award.
The difference is if you give it to Caleb Williams, more than likely he's going to play in the NFL and maybe have a good career. Stetson Bennett, Max Duggan, probably not going to play. I mean, they might get drafted, might be on an NFL team, to where when you hear those names in the future, you'll be like, oh, Max Duggan, Stetson Bennett, Heisman winner, Georgia quarterback. And you're right there. I mean, that puts a little bit more weight on the award when you're like, I remember that guy because he was a college football quarterback. He was a stud back in the day.
Right.
Caleb Williams, you're going to forget about his college career in 5 years.
Sir Boy Wonder, breaking news.
Von Miller out for the year?
Yep.
Ooh.
No big deal.
Hey, if that's,
Tell you what, we might need to get Sir Boy a job. He's in chat,
on top.
always breaking.
By the
news.
way, you were giving me saying that we're gonna put a budget on how many baseball topics we could talk on in this thing. What was going on during Tom's show for the entire 2 hours? Every there'd be a conversation. I mean, we had Wes Miller talking up there about the crosstown shootout, and half the comments were just breaking news from the winter meetings.
And it was irrelevant to everybody that was in the chat.
That's what the chat was talking about, though. That's what I'm saying. All right, let's move on.
Go ahead. Let's hear this take. Here we go.
So
Not a good one, but we'll listen to it.
I'm going to get in front of this. You know, in the NFL, there's been a couple of drafts that have stood the test of time and like, man, all these great quarterbacks came out of one draft. And I'm going to get out in front of this. So you think of it, Jim Kelly, what was it, Dan Marino and John Elway were all in the same draft, right? 3 Hall of Famers, great players, all in the same draft. Then you look at 2004, where Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger all were drafted in the same draft. All going to be Hall of Famers, won multiple Super Bowls. I'm going to say that the 2020 draft, just happened a few years ago, is going to go down in history as a better draft than the 2004 draft. And I'm going to draw some parallels here. All right? So let's go back to 2004. Who was drafted? Phillip Rivers. All right? Phillip Rivers, in his first 3 years, he goes to the Chargers, 77 touchdowns, 35 interceptions, 10,500 passing yards. He had a 33-15 record and 95 passer rating. Who does he draw comparisons to? Well, you don't have to look too far. Justin Herbert. Chargers quarterback, 89 touchdowns, similar interception rate, a few more passing yards just because the game has evolved. His passer rating, identical. Now, Justin Herbert hasn't won as much as Phillip Rivers through his first 3 years, but I think we can all see what the Chargers are building, knowing they're going to be fine in the future. They've got a good offensive line. They're just unhealthy. They've got some decent weapons. Herbert's going to be fine. I liken him to Phillip Rivers. All right, let's move it on. Who was the other guy drafted in that draft? Big Ben. Big physical quarterback. Winner from the onslaught. Physically gifted. Who does that remind me of? Jalen Hurts. Not as big as Big Ben, but he's physically gifted. You watch him and you say, oh, man, this dude can run. He can do stuff on the field that no one else can do. That was Big Ben. Plus, they're winning. Remember, Big Ben won his first 11 games as a starter. I think he went to the Super Bowl his rookie season. Through his first 3 years, 29-11. This guy can extend plays. That's what Jalen Hurts does. Jalen Hurts in his first 3 years, 20-11, just seems to win ball games. One more like him. Both play in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Big Ben, Pittsburgh, Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia. All right, so let's keep it going. Eli Manning. He was the first overall draft pick, went to the Giants. He was originally drafted by the Chargers, and then they flipped with Phillip Rivers because he didn't want to play for the Chargers. Eli Manning is a guy, he just sits in the pocket. He's patient. He does it and probably never did wow you when he played, but he just seemed to keep winning ball games. You keep finding Eli Manning playing in the postseason, playing deep into the postseason, and every time you face the Giants, just seemed to look up and they had more points than you. Who is that like right now? Tua. The Dolphins just keep winning games when he goes on out there. I know they had a bad game this past weekend, but it just seems that this, patient quarterback that never wows you, just sits in the pocket, is incredibly accurate, just continues to win games. And what puts 2020 draft class over the 2004 draft class? JB9, Joe Burrow. Dude's just a winner. He's elite. And I know I'm riding high after seeing them beat the Titans and the Chiefs back-to-back weeks. But Joe Burrow has elevated this franchise, franchise in poverty for most of their livelihood. And he's elevated them to the forefront of the AFC in just 3 years. 2020 draft class is going to be better than 2004.
Yeah, you can try to get out in front of it as much as you want. I wonder if that's what you were. If you were so bored driving back from Florida that's what you decided to try to think up or conjure up, because you just tried to convince me that Eli Manning isn't as good as Tua.
I'm saying that they seem very similar.
No.
In the fact that they are accurate passers.
No.
They never wow you. They went to franchises that were good in the past, hadn't been good in recently before they got drafted, and has turned them around, and they continue to win ball games.
I mean, it's just a bad take. I don't know what else to tell you other than that's just a bad take. I know you put it on the list here. I'm trying to be nice. At the end of the day, you can sit here and say what you want. Okay, you got Joe Burrow and you got Justin Herbert. Outside of that, you got a bunch of trash bags. And you're trying to sit here and you're trying to compare them to Hall of Famers, Ben Roethlisberger. You guys should respect Ben Roethlisberger as much as anybody in around here, especially the chat.
Ben Roethlisberger,
and then on top of that, we're trying to compare Eli Manning to Tua Tagovailoa, who no one knows. No one's gonna know the guy's last name officially because he's gonna last in this year, maybe for a couple more. That's at most. He has been the benefactor of the Cheetah. The Cheetah came and saved his career for just a short amount of time.
He was 8-0 last year. He was 8-0 as a starter.
No,
without Cheetah.
No. Let's go to the. I mean, unfortunately, like I said, I've been busy. Wasn't able to come up with some topics. We're gonna go to Scott Boras, which you have this take of Scott Boras, which is whatever. I genuinely. I don't have much of a thought on Scott Boras. He's there to try to make his players money, and that's it.
Well, here's my take. And Paul, I'd like you to chime in because you're a baseball guy, and an overall sports guy. Is Scott Boras the most powerful man in baseball? More so than Robert Manfred. More so than I don't even know who leads the players union right now.
Yeah,
but Scott Boras is the most powerful man in baseball, in my opinion.
I would say so because he doesn't have to report to anybody. Because Rob Manfred works on behalf of the owners, right? The players' union is obviously doing what's best for the players. But Scott Boras.
When you hear a guy on your team sign Scott Boras as his agent, what do? You moan a little bit. You're like, oh my gosh, means we're going to have to pay the man. No one is better at their job in the MLB, and maybe professional sports, than Scott Boras. And my man, no one is more to blame for these contracts constantly rising than Scott frickin' Boras. What did Marty call him? Called him the Antichrist.
He did, but I mean, there's only two rational thoughts with Scott, or if he holds the power to be, right? It's like Scott is always finding a way to raise the limits to whatever someone's worth or someone's getting paid, which is exactly his job. But my thought is like it's ultimately the owners who hold the ultimate card. You sign the guy or you don't. And the only thought that I keep having is maybe something that the players keep bringing up when it comes to the salary cap thought is that, listen, you guys keep telling us that you're not making any money, but we look around the league and these salaries just keep going up. People are getting paid more and more and more money. Like, where is the hole here? Because my problem with the whole situation, what you're talking about with Boras, which then leads into higher pay, which then ultimately leads into this quote-unquote inflation or bubble that we presume to be. At what point does that bubble burst? Because where is all this money coming from? Genuinely. If there's not that many people that are going to the games, and there's not that much national attention to the brand, and there's not that much money that's being paid to these regional sports networks who aren't going to be able to go out and sell advertising at the rates they need to sell it at to be able to pay the franchises what they're asking for their TV rights deals. Who's the loser in all this? And I think the losers are the regional sports networks because they took a chance. They bet on the fact they were going to get a lot of people watching on these programs, and they have not gotten that because again, not to make this a big business thing, but you got companies like YouTube TV.
Google, yep.
And YouTube TV is obviously a Google brand. Google, humongous pockets, could care less if they lose a little bit of revenue from YouTube TV, or YouTube TV doesn't do as well for a year or even 2 years, and they wanted to play a game. YouTube TV decided, you know what? Forget the regional sports networks. We're not gonna carry any of Bally's stuff, and we're gonna see how many people cancel and leave. And you know what probably happened? Some people canceled, but a lot of people didn't. And they were just like, so what? I'm just not gonna watch my local baseball team on TV anymore. I'll have to find an alternative way to watch them if I really care. And the truth is that is who holds the ultimate card at the end of the day, is the TV networks. In every league around the country, you look at the TV networks, they're the ones that spur whether or not that league is doing well or not doing well, because they ultimately are the ones that are paying the owners. The fans anymore, they're not paying the owners. We're not going to that many games anymore, quite frankly.
Right.
And the only thing that we all do, and we're all doing it on here, is we watch screens a lot. We watch screens all day long. And if those numbers don't add up to be enough money to pay these franchises what they need to get paid to pay the salaries, forget it. And that bubble, it's not just going to burst, but I think what will end up happening is these regional sports networks are going to go under, or they're going to have to renegotiate these deals with these franchises, and these franchises are going to have a lot less income than they thought they would have. I know I just went on a huge monologue right there, but that's the whole problem with the whole situation.
Let me take you back to 2018, 2019, when Bally Sports announced that they were buying Fox Regional Networks. That's what happened, right? They thought, in their mind, they saw the books probably and said, listen, we're just getting screwed on these streaming services. They're not paying enough to get us on these sites. And they said, listen, we're going to buy it. We're going to jack that price up to YouTube TV and all these streaming services. And they walked into those negotiations, and big old Google, Alphabet, said, good luck on your own. And those guys, those Bally Sports people that brokered that sale, that brokered that buy of Fox Regional Sports, probably got back in their cars after those meetings and had a very quiet drive back to the airport or wherever they're going, just dead quiet about what mess did they get themselves into. Then they said, all right, here's what we'll do. We'll take a shot. We'll make our own app. We'll have people subscribe to us. We'll wait for opening day. And then the opening day numbers came around, and whoever was championing that buy, let's go buy Fox Regional Sports, is sitting very quiet, drinking heavily on opening day, just like, what the hell did we get into?
No, 100%.
Because they're trying to sell it now, 3 years later.
They're in bad shape. That's ultimately what will end up happening. So let's jump into the MLB offseason really quickly. You think it's the best? I actually think it might be the best because it's just wild. It's all over the place. Let's get into something really quickly with the Reds. We had this little bit of a debate out there. I want to know what the chat thinks. I don't want to sign a single player. I really don't. Unless the single mission of signing that player is to flip them at the trade deadline, which is possible.
Yeah.
You could go Billy Bean style. You could call up the owner and say, listen, I got a deal for you. I'm going to sign him myself. But when I flip and I turn him around and I sell him for more money at the deadline than he's worth, and I keep the money. And then obviously that's when the owner was like, all right, fine, you can buy him. But I just don't, from a Reds perspective, I don't want to obviously Mike Minor's a slam dunk.
Man.
The one that's been brought up multiple times is if Andrew McCutchen is signed by the Reds, I knew
what
I was
about a short 1 year deal?
I don't want it. Can we at least set the culture, the expectations within the franchise of saying, you know what, we're going to build from within, we're going to draft well, we're going to develop well, and when the trade deadline comes around, when it means that we're a part of something that could be special, we'll spend our money then. Until then, forget it. Do the Reds have any chance of winning more than 75 games next year?
No.
I mean, no. So what are we doing? Why is it even a hint that we're going to get Andrew McCutchen?
Yeah.
Well, they got to sign somebody to
we
get
don't.
fans in the seats. No, I'm not saying that. I know what you're saying. I'm saying the ownership. This is the same deal that we've been doing for years. You got to sign somebody to get at least some kind of excitement going.
I don't think you do, though.
I'm with you. I'm saying from their perspective, they're sitting there thinking, oh, we got to do something to get a few season tickets back.
You think so?
Kutch, get him.
Former MVP, decade ago. Around the same time Mark Ingram was winning the Heisman.
Yeah. He was good one time.
I just
Sign
don't.
him up.
It depends. It depends on the length of the deal. So let me. You say flipping people.
Yeah.
What if you get Andrew McCutchen on an $8 million deal 1 year?
No.
And you're saying it's not going to hurt the pockets, but maybe he could be worth, I don't know, hit 15, 17 home runs, and at the deadline you get somebody and you get a mid-level prospect to come over to your farm system. Is that worth it? That's
I get what you're getting at. All I'm saying is this: it's more or less a shift in focus and a culture standpoint with the Reds and Krall and the management. And if the ownership group thinks for the slightest bit that if they go out and sign Andrew McCutchen, that it's going to somehow help us Reds fans to want to come back to the ballpark, they are sorely missing the mark. They've completely whiffed on the fan base. The fan base, quite frankly, right now, to a large extent, could care less who they sign for the most part because they understand where we're at as a franchise at this very moment. Unless you go out and get Aaron Judge or you go out and get some enormously big name, Carlos Correa, you're not going to get any excitement. You're just going to get zero excitement from the Reds fan base. So it's almost like this freezing point with water, which I've tried to explain before in here, is like, it doesn't matter the temperature of water if it's above 32 degrees because it's just not going to freeze, right? But as soon as you hit that perfect mark, 32 or below, it's going to freeze. The Reds have to be in a position where they don't try to go and win over a fan base unless they're going to seriously do it, and they don't have the means to do it. They can't possibly do it. So let's just focus on the farm system. Let's focus on trying to get some of these younger guys up into the system, up in Major League Baseball experience, and get us excited over that. I'm not saying you need to rush Elly De La Cruz to the big leagues, but I sure as hell know one thing. He's going to sell tickets as much as Andrew McCutchen will. I also know that if you get a McLean in there and you promote the fact that you got these young guys, you have to start there. And if we start to try to think that we're going to win over fans by buying these guys that are retreads, Cincinnati has this weird thing with retreads, man. I don't understand it. It's
what?
Like,
what do you mean?
Oh, we love going and getting. And I know I'm going to bring up some people like Ryan Ludwig. We'll go get that guy. We'll try to get Brandon Phillips. That worked out beautifully, by the way. Yes, sometimes they work out. We'll go get a Schooner Jeanette when he's hit a 200
was
for 5 years.
retread.
Brandon Phillips struggled. He wasn't a superstar when he came to Cincinnati. I mean, we've gone and gotten a few superstars, right? You could argue, obviously, the Griffey situation and all that. But what I'm trying to explain is that at the end of the day, we aren't interested as a fan base in getting anybody that is meaningful to this specific season. If you think you can flip them, great. But if you think that you need to go get guys to get the Reds fans excited for this season, no. Like it's. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic about it, but I just want to focus on the future. Can we just focus on the future?
Well, then what's the like map out the blueprint? So I'll take you back to me being a Cubs fan. The blueprint for the Cubs a decade ago was to draft hitting, develop hitters.
Yeah, Don. Let's bring back Tucker Barnhart. Sorry to cut you off. That's what I'm talking about. Retreads. Just keep buying them up.
But I'm saying is, what is the Reds' blueprint? So I'll tell you, the Cubs' blueprint a decade ago when they were rebuilding was draft hitters, and they were very successful at that. They were drafting hitters when everyone else was drafting pitchers. They were going against the grain. Then once it was time for those guys to make it to the MLB, they made a push for a big arm. They got veteran pitchers on the other side, and then one bat. So what is the blueprint for the Reds? Is it sign these pitchers when everyone else is getting these young athletic hitters? Do they go against the grain and get these long-term pitchers, Nick Lodolo, Hunter Green, maybe even Graham Ashcraft, get these guys long-term, lock them up, and then when it becomes time, hopefully guys like Tyler Stevenson, Jonathan India continue to develop. You get an Elly De La Cruz that develops. Then you got your 3 core hitters, and then you supplement them with veteran pieces. Is that the blueprint? Like I'm asking, what is the blueprint?
The blueprint for me is to focus on the middle of the field, which we have not done as a Reds franchise in quite some time. We have a catcher.
Catcher, shortstop.
We have the pitchers.
Center fielder.
We need to find. You tell me the last. I've said this before. What was the last great shortstop that the Reds have had?
Yeah, it was 17 years ago, Barry Larkin.
Barry Larkin.
Yeah.
That's a real problem. Okay, you can say whatever you want about baseball, and yeah, it's a little different. It's very individualized. Yeah, that a shortstop might not mean as much to a franchise as a quarterback would to the NFL's franchises, but a shortstop's very important. You know what else is very important? A center fielder. When was the last time the Reds had a everyday center fielder that you knew was nails? You knew when you walked out there that was a guy you could depend on.
Kozar started in an all-star game, but there hasn't been one. Hasn't been one.
And that's my main priority. Make that a focus. Stop getting lost in the idea that, and again, I love Joey Votto as much as anyone. We signed him long-term, sure, so what? You could say whether or not he deserved that contract, but I think I've come to realize that as a small market teams, you focus on the middle of the field, and you try to make that as good as you possibly can. There's always going to be a first baseman that can hit that's just lingering out there somewhere. There's always going to be a third baseman that can probably produce at the plate and be a little bit of a liability defensively.
Yeah, you can get those guys.
Those guys are relatively affordable. And you can also say the same thing about outfielders in general. My main problem with the Reds is that we sit around and we act like, and again, I'm not trying to crush these guys because they're probably good-hearted people and they probably love their time in Cincinnati. But we sit around and we act like Kyle Farmer is going to be a big-time difference maker and lead us to the World Series. We sit around and act like a guy like Tucker Barnhart, who can't hit his way out of a paper bag, is going to be a centerpiece on a championship team. We act like guys like Drew Stubbs and Nick Senzel and these guys that get hurt every other day. We bring in Akiyama, we play him for 10 days, and then he leaves. I just don't understand what the direction of this franchise has been a part of in the last, 15 years. If we we've started to make shortstop a priority, I give them all the credit in the world. Mm-hmm. I'm not against Nick Krall. All I'm saying is I'm tired of bringing in retreads and acting like everything's all right. You're polishing a turd. I'm sick and tired of hearing about how Tucker Barnhart was a huge loss. I'm sick and tired of hearing about how Kyle Farmer was a big loss. Do you watch baseball? Do you see what world championship teams look like?
Isn't it so sobering when you watch the postseason and you see their lineups and you're like, oh my God, we aren't close.
Yeah, I forgot. Billy Hamilton. We stuck around with Billy Hamilton for 5 years because the guy was fast. He could run fast. If you watch baseball, you realize Billy Hamilton was never going to be able to steal first base. He just wasn't. He was just this. And that's another thing the Reds have done an amazing marketing job. Give whoever's idea it is, and maybe they didn't do it on accident, I don't know. But we tout these guys in the minor leagues, and that's some of my concern right now with the Reds, because I've heard about how great all these minor leaguers have been for years. Nick Senzel was going to be the dude. Drew Stubbs was going to be the dude. It's like Jay Bruce, honestly, around here had a great Reds career. But if you talk to Cincinnati fans about Jay Bruce, you would have thought, honestly, he was Barry Bonds, but the way we act about him. I'm just think that we elevate all of these players in Cincinnati, and they're not as good as you think they are. They're just not that great. I got another question for you, and I love Brandon Phillips as much as anybody, but Brandon Phillips and Matt Carpenter were very much of the same productive type of player, and one was flamboyant and one was similar to Ocho Cinco, and the Reds fan base loved him. And I'm not trying to crush Brandon Phillips, but what I'm saying is that we overvalue these guys. We act like they're significantly better than other players are, and it's tiresome. I know I'm going on a rampage. I know I'm just so tired of the Reds always thinking they have more than they really do, because they don't have much.
The thing about one guy that you brought up in your rant, you brought up 30 points that I could touch on, but the one thing I'm thinking back to a few years ago, Nick Senzel was kind of a death blow to those teams, those Reds teams that were on the borderline of needing a pushover. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When they were winning 84 games, if Nick Senzel turns into a ball player, he pushes them over that edge into becoming a postseason team. He was a death blow. Him getting hurt all the time, him even when he wasn't hurt, wasn't producing. He was a big miss for the Reds. They put a lot of stock in him.
Go ahead.
No, because I was going off on a little bit of a different tangent. So
no, Everett just brought up what we were going to do with Brandon Phillips. All I'm saying is that at some point you do the Patriots model is all I'm trying to say. And I know that as a fan and as a fan of a part of a fan base, you might not like to hear this, but I feel like the Reds front office at times have catered to the fan base. They've signed guys that that to extensions, or they've tried to keep guys around that theoretically are fans. Like, hell, you can't trade Scooter Gennett. This guy's a hustler. He's a ball player. You can't get rid of Ryan Friel. He's the heartbeat of this team. You can't get rid of Tucker Barnhart. He's the guy. Like, no, they're just average at best Major League Baseball players, maybe below average.
Not selling Scooter Gennett at a high was
so. Anyways, you have Hamilton. We'll skip down. Hamilton
I got
history.
2 things. I got to step out to do. I got to step out to do an interview here in just a second. So I want to say 2 things.
Yeah,
little bit off, but one is that Wilson Contreras just went to the Cardinals for 5 years.
That physically hurts me.
Okay.
Physically hurts me.
Second thing is it just in baseball as a whole. When I was at Xavier in West Virginia on Saturday, the crowd was on its feet almost the entire game. Great atmosphere.
Yeah.
At one point, I thought to myself, when was the last time I went to a Major League Baseball regular season game that mattered or that the fans were into or that anybody stood up for? That I was excited that you left the game and you were like, that was a really fun game. You've seen it in San Diego. LA's had a few of those. The Yankees this year. I mean, you see it every once in a while. But I can't remember.
Go to Wrigley.
I went to the Nationals and Dodgers in the playoffs, and I think 2016 that was the year that they played.
Yeah.
That's 6 going on 7 years ago by the time next baseball season goes on. That's the last time I was at any baseball game
that mattered.
That juiced. That was cool.
I went to the Reds game a couple years ago. They played the Cubs. It was Aquino's 3 home run game against Kyle Hendricks. It was the height of the Punisher. It was the height of that.
I was at
GAP was kind of juiced there.
I was at what's his name's no hitter, but like that's not like that.
Who's no hitter?
Arrieta.
Well, yeah, that was a different team.
I know, but I'm saying like games that were like I know that's like for the
no,
Cubs.
but if you're trying,
I'm trying to manufacture something here, and I got nothing.
No, you're trying to. Basically, what it boils down to is basketball and football are more exciting than baseball.
Yeah, but
that's the problem
when you're
at
building
the
teams.
base.
Like, look at what's happening in San Diego. Like, look at what's happening in San Diego. Has been electric the last 2 years.
Cardinals.
Well, why is that,
Cardinals? I know. It's not rocket science. I'm just saying. It made me sad as somebody that loves baseball that I was like, I've been fired up at a baseball game in 7 years.
I'm going to say
something. You know why we're loud at a baseball game? Because I want my damn La Rosa's pizza on that 11 strikeout. That's why I stand up and cheer in the night.
There is a big cheer at the end of that. There's no doubt about that.
I will say this. I do think there is something to be said about the idea that when it does happen, and as a Reds fan, you have to believe that it will, that it's going to mean so much more. It's going to feel so much better than if it happened all the time, right? Like, I don't know if Cardinal fans, which, again, I don't know if Cardinal fans would ever be as jubilant and as excited as we will ever be as Reds fandom if the Reds were to make the World Series, or hell, even win the World Series, dare I say. So I hold out hope there. It's like maybe when you grow up poor and you don't have a whole lot of food on your plate sometimes as a kid, and you grow up and you finally taste a little bit of wealth, it just means more. Not to pull out an SEC pun, but it will feel so much better as Reds fandom if we get to that point. And I truly think we're closer than we think we are, as long as we don't screw this up. And when I say screw it up, I mean cave into the fan base and think that we're going to be able to win us back by just going out and getting Andrew McCutchen, which is laughable, but I'm saying it anyways.
So one last moment thing I'll take about taking flyers on players as teams. Obviously, the Cubs took Cody Bellinger for $17.5 million, and I realized, and I felt almost bad. I have a thing shtick, whatever you want to call it, where I'm a heel to Reds fans. I like poking fun at them. I felt genuinely a little bad when I realized that the Reds literally could not do things like the Cubs did last night, getting Cody Bellinger, because they don't have $17 million to just like be like, yeah, let's see if this works out. They can't do that.
No, they can't miss.
They can't miss on the retreads that you keep talking. If they're going to try to give a guy they can't do reclamation projects at all. They can't get anybody that was good at one point that is still young enough, still youthful enough, still at the prime, and say, hey, we'll give a shot at you. They can't do that because they can't miss. They can't expend money on these reclamation projects. They got to spend money on homegrown people to keep them around, or they have to have a surefire thing. And that's where the Reds find themselves in the predicament that they are today. They missed on the surefires, the big spin-ins.
At the end of the day, the best PR for the Reds is to win. And the way to win, in my opinion, is, like I said before, focus on your young talent crop that you have. Try to develop it. Continue to invest into any kind of trade pieces you possibly could have for 2025 and moving forward. It's that simple.
Trace, have you ever had a Sky Rosa?
I've not, but it sounds terrible.
It is delicious. Get one. Next time, you need to get Cam one. You need to get Grayson one. Get yourself a nice...
What? I know this sounds terrible, and I'm going to
You don't know what it is, do you?
It's obviously Skyline and La Rosa's. What do they do with... What are we looking at here?
You literally take yourself pepperoni slice of za, and then you get a coney, and you put it quite literally just on the pizza, fold it up, and eat it all in one bite. Gotta get everything in one bite. The chili, the bun, the hot dog, the pizza, the bread. Now, that sounds disgusting, but if you found out that Richard's Pizza was selling a Skyline pizza where they put, like, Skyline chili underneath the cheese on the pizza, you wouldn't think that sounds absolutely disgusting. You'd think that sounds all right. Sounds like a heart attack.
I don't know.
Just try it.
I'll try. I'll try almost anything, to be honest with you.
All right, so I just had a little small cherry on top to round out the show. I was looking for stuff, and I remember. So I woke up today, and I've been bringing this for a while. Trace, I've been telling you this for 3 years now, whether you realize this, and I think you've never believed me once about this. Off 747, there was a little town named after my family.
I know where you're going with this.
Mousetown. And I get a DM today from WMOH Newswire. I get 2 different messages. I went back to the bathroom earlier, and Bailey Osborne pulls me aside like, Reed, did you see this? Did you see this? They put out a picture today. Go ahead and pull up the graphic. It has Hamilton history on it. It is a picture of the sign named after my great-grandpa. Look at this. Mousetown, Ohio. Right there off 747, about 10 minutes away from here in Hamilton. If you go on the Snapchat map, you still got it. It exists. I've been telling you that it exists for years now, and there's the proof. The proof is in the pudding. There is a real Mousetown. It's still there. It's still in the county records.
You better tell Mousetown that they're going to have to go around and pull out the old basket and have some people drop some money in the hat, because they're going to be missing a sign, if I had to guess, within the next year.
It is.
They're going to have to replace that sign that they just put up.
It is gone.
I probably shouldn't pander like that, because what if someone wants to steal it? It's not us at all, and they're like, "Hey, pull up that clip." And then all of a sudden, I got to answer questions.
Right. You got Sheriff Jones knocking on the door.
Well, I ain't worried about Sheriff Jones. Let me tell you, the last guy I'm worried about is Sheriff Jones.
Sir boy, you said it looks like a shack. Take that back. That is the Mouse family estate. So the fun story that I've always heard about this is that, and it's probably not true, no way it's true, is that my great-grandpa, who lived in that house that the picture was, he was just sitting around drinking one day, drunk, and he was messing with his buddies and said, you know what, I'm going to put a sign outside my house that says Mousetown. So he put a sign outside their house that said Mousetown, and then the state came around and was giving signs to all these small villages and towns and cities. This is the folklore that I love. And they saw this sign that said Mousetown, and they said, all right. Month later, they doctored up the sign and planted it right where that sign was and got Mousetown a new sign, and it was put into Butler County Records. But that's all I had. What's for lunch today?
I feel like we need to get that sign.
Let's get it. Hang it right here.
Doesn't seem like that sign is in a place that is highly watched.
It's right there by that Shooters on 747, if you know what I'm talking about.
It doesn't appear like that's a place that's going to have a whole lot of traffic around it at night.
Hey, you don't want to mess with the mouses. We are a dangerous bunch.
You know what I'm saying?
Dangerous bunch. All right. What's for lunch? What's on the wheel?
I don't have hardly anything on the wheel except for Chipotle right now.
Ooh, we got to put it. What sounds good to you, Casey?
I don't know why I let the Reds
Honestly, Chipotle sounds good. That's
why do the Reds hold such a tug on my heart, man? It's just so sad, because there's nothing more enjoyable than
because this is a baseball town.
A pennant race. There's nothing more enjoyable than a sold-out crowd, the anticipation of a full count with the bases loaded, or even just
nothing
a pitch,
builds drama like a good baseball
just
game.
a pitch with a guy in scoring position when it's a playoff game. It's just you can't replicate that.
My favorite football team is at probably the highest they've been in my life, easily in my lifetime, maybe ever, with what they're going with right now, what they got going, the Bengals. And I found myself on this car ride home from Florida yesterday, constantly just refreshing, looking up every freaking rumor that I could find about who the freaking Chicago Cubs were going to sign. It ruins my life. But for lunch, I'm going to throw Gina's on there.
Just sad. Is it too much to ask for that as a town? Is it too much to ask for
a good baseball team?
A baseball team that's
in a baseball town,
just relevant. I'm not asking for us to win the Central. I'm not asking for us to win a playoff series.
You want to play some
I don't even know. I don't
September.
even know if I'm asking for us to win a playoff game.
You just want them to play in September for some meaningful games, and that's what McCutcheon's going to bring to the bunch.
Just get me past the All-Star break. That's all I ask.
Get you to football. Hold you over throughout the summer months to when you can watch Georgia and Aaron Rodgers being trotted back on out there for another year. Do you have any suggestions for lunch?
Hibachi.
Ooh, hibachi.
Anything else?
By the way, chat, can we talk about something? Could you imagine calling a basketball game where the number one team in the country loses and you have no recollection of it? Could you imagine being in the booth for so many games, so many relatively obviously meaningful games, that you don't even remember the game? Is that wild, chat, or not?
Like, he might not have done it. He said, I don't know if I was there or not. I think I was. I don't even know, but we got to grill Tom about that.
Spirit Cat, I'd love some hibachi. We have I hate to tell everybody last minute like this. We do have a quick call at 1:00 with an audio engineer, so let's get this wheel on.
Let's just go. Whatever we've got up there, is it three suggestions? What'd you suggest, Casey?
I put on there McDonald's, Gina's, hibachi, and Chipotle.
All right, let's rock.
Troy said he absolutely did call it. I mean, that's my point. Wild. That's just so wild to me, man.
That's tough.
Gina's is out. I can't imagine that.
Do you remember every high school basketball game you've called?
No, but if I called the state championship game, I remember it.
Ooh, we got two good ones up there.
What do we got? Oh, there's only one winner here. Come on.
Did you spell hibachi right?
Come on. Doesn't matter. Give it to me. Golly, that's terrible.
We didn't do multiple things. We knew it was going to be Chipotle.
Well, we figured out the other day when you were gone that we think it's random.
All right.
I'll do it.
He's gonna do it until he gets the result we want. Oh my gosh!
All right, we got to stick with Chipotle. All right.
Selective memory.
That's 3 out of 5.
That's probably more and more.
He just
that's probably incredibly true.
He just keeps spinning it. It just keeps ending up Chipotle. Guys, it was nice to be back in the seat.
Was it?
It was.
Got some things moving and grooving here at Chatterbox. Again, we have a good amount of viewership, as always. Towards the end of the show, we can't thank you enough. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
We will be back Friday better than ever, probably breaking down a little bit of that UC Xavier game. They call it the Crosstown Shootout around here.
Big Bengals game this weekend, too.
Is there? Yeah, I guess they're playing the Browns. That's a big game.
Is there
anything worse? Than the middle of July? I want you to think about this.
Middle of February?
No. Oh. Is there anything worse than being in the middle of July and having no hope that your favorite baseball franchise is going to win again?
Already
No.
looking forward to football season.
No, there's not. And all I'm just asking from the bottom of my heart, can we figure it out down there on Joe Nuxall Way? Can we figure it out? Can we just figure it out?
Starts with Kutch. Thanks,
We'll
guys.
be back Friday.
See ya.
See you, everybody.